Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C 311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C 311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.
Good morning. If everybody could find their seats for me, please. Well, thank you, everybody, and for showing up this morning. I know this is a pretty jam-packed schedule we have today, so we're on a fairly tight timeline, and so I thought we ought to just go ahead and get started. First, I want to thank my colleagues for being here today, coming again for another meeting of this subcommittee on establishing the VGC. Clerk, if you can call a roll, please.
Delegate Austin.
Present.
Delegate Torian. Delegate Bulova.
Here.
Senator McPike.
Here.
Senator Eben.
Here.
Senator Pillion. Delegate Krizek.
Here.
Senator Reeves.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have a quorum, so I'm going to lean over to my vice chair. Do you have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we adopt the virtual meeting policy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Delegate Bulova. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion is passed. So as chairman, one of my duties is to make sure we stay on time, but also kind of control what's happening today as far as what's being briefed. There are some paperwork. If you haven't got it, I don't know how much is left at the front desk if you are just walking in on what some of the briefing points are going to be today. I just want to remind everybody, we're here as a joint subcommittee to really talk about the Virginia Gaming Commission and setting that up. And that's really our sole purpose, but we've kind of morphed into not just that, but also looking at all different types of gaming and those things have we kind of opened Pandora's box, so to speak, on gambling in the Commonwealth, and it's much needed. And I think this committee has borne out the fact that the VGC needed to be set up about 10 years ago as we were looking at this, so we're a little behind the ball. But all those members, just so you all know, are focused on getting that passed this year. Last year, it became a political hostage, I think, a little bit, but I think we're all refocused now. So that's really the comments I have. I'm going to turn it over to my vice chair, Delegate Krizek, for comments, and then members as we open up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as the chairman has indicated, we have a packed meeting today. We have 6 presentations. Each one will have 20 minutes. It's a hard stop. The clerk will be putting up the clock, and we will have to stop you at 20 minutes. But there will be some opportunity for questions from the dais and the podium up here. And then, so I don't think we're going to have any time at the end of the meeting for public comment because it's the hard stop. And we will have 2 more meetings. And this is kind of a new announcement. I know many of you in the room are going to be surprised. I'm looking over at Director Jones. But the next meeting will be, this meeting, as you know, is just purely about iGaming. And the reason for this meeting was, as we promised during the session when the iGaming bill came to our committee, that we would hold this meeting as an opportunity to study the proposal, the bill, and to look at iGaming and get the pros and the cons, and that's what you're going to get today. Next meeting will be on casinos, and it'll be on the casinos that are up, and we'll have the lottery make a presentation on how that's going, and then we'll then have a discussion of the 2 casinos that are on their way, and then the 2 potential ones that are out there that maybe are hoping to get their day up here. So we'll give them their opportunity in those for and against. So that will be a day just dedicated to casinos, and we'll have a final meeting hopefully before session starts that can focus on the Virginia Gaming Commission and those issues that we haven't hit, maybe store course racing machines, charitable gaming, things like that. But as the chairman said, a lot of what we're doing is the kind of work that you would expect the Virginia Gaming Commission to do. And so let me remind us all why we're here, because the stakes are pretty clear. Gaming can continue to be a powerful engine for jobs, revenue, and community investment, but it's got to be managed responsibly. And without streamlined oversight, the risks multiply. Predatory practices, inconsistent rules, heightened risk for problem gambling, and a loss of public trust. The Virginia Gaming Commission is the step we need to preserve the good, address those challenges, and build a fair, accountable, and prosperous gaming industry for everyone in the Commonwealth. So that is really what this is all about. So today we're going to focus on iGaming, and we've got 2 more meetings to come, and we'll have plenty of opportunity during session to debate the merits of the Virginia Gaming Commission. But we really are trying to show you how important it is to have this stood up hopefully next session we can get it going. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Krizek. Any other members on the commission? None. Seeing that, I saw Delegate Simon. Would you like to come up? You're first in the queue. Give us an overview of House Bill 2171.
I've got a few slides, and I'll run through them for you guys pretty quickly. First, I want to associate myself with Vice Chair Krizek's comments. I mean, I think you're exactly right, and that's really the point of this bill. We're not creating a new category here with iGaming. The idea that somehow we're going to create the ability to gamble on your phone is not what's happening with this bill. That ability already exists. There's already a market, and we'll get to that, some of the stats on that in the slides. But my goal is to bring it under a regulated umbrella here, right, where we can have some oversight of it, we can have some supervision of it, and some of the revenue that comes in as a result of it is taxable and is an opportunity for the Commonwealth to get access to the revenue, but also to say, hey, some of that's going to go towards problem gaming, some of that's going to go towards some of our other priorities to help mitigate some of the negative effects that are associated with gambling. So do we, here it is. Okay, that's not it. There it is. All right. And am I able to advance the slides from here, or do you need to do that? Oh, look, I can do it. All right. So quickly, what is iGaming? iGaming is internet gaming, or iGaming. It describes online casino games of chance. The games can be played from a mobile device, a tablet, or a computer. It typically includes games like roulette, craps, poker, blackjack, and some form of slot machine. When offered in a well-regulated manner, again, it offers convenience and safety for participants across the jurisdiction. Just a couple of quick stats about that, as promised. 8 states have legalized iGaming. In Nevada, it's iPoker, but it's translated to roughly 14% of the U.S. adult population already has access to legal iGaming on their devices. In 2023, the legal iGaming market generated $5.6 billion in gross gaming revenue for those states. Virginians, in the meantime, have wagered an estimated $16 billion in the illegal, unregulated online casino market in just 2024. Again, like I said, we're not creating a new category here. This isn't something new, something Virginians are already participating in and spending their money on. We just want to improve the way that that's done. So legal sports betting and iGaming already exists in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and West Virginia, which are all very close by. We have legal mobile sports betting here in Virginia. Kentucky, North Carolina, Maryland, and DC have them as well. And iGaming is being considered by our neighbors in Maryland, North Carolina, and Washington, DC. So we're not blazing a completely new trail here. We'll be in good company. It's an opportunity for Virginia to modernize its gaming options, and it's also going to help land-based casinos. And there's another presentation that will be coming up later today that'll really get into the details and specifics on how that dynamic works to help both entities do better and creates more jobs. But just note that Virginia could generate an additional $5.3 billion in taxable revenue. So notice that's the gross number, right? That's the revenue that's available to be taxed. At what rate you guys decide to tax it, or the commission decides to do it, and so forth. We have some suggestions in the bill, and we'll go through those, but we don't presume to set those rates here today. Over that same period of time, growth rates in land-based casino revenue is projected to grow 8.4%. Alongside the market with iGaming. And then job growth. iGaming states have outperformed non-iGaming states in land-based gaming jobs by anywhere from 0.6 to 5.4% a year. So we've seen in those places where you already have iGaming that it does in fact help the land-based casinos and creates more jobs. So it's not stealing anything from them. The illegal market. I mean, there is an illegal market, and a lot of it comes from offshore. The National Associations of Attorneys General, I know it's a little bit hard to read that fine print, but that's a letter saying, hey, we need your help. In the states, we need the federal help to deal with the offshore gaming. It's too big a problem for us to try and just ban it here in Virginia. We could set a ban on it. We could try and criminalize it, but the actors that are doing it are out of our reach, and which is part of the reason for this call to do a legal iGaming market here in Virginia. We can sort of starve the bad actors out of existence by providing a legal, regulated, and taxed alternative that's more consumer friendly and built-in protections by doing it here. So it's just another approach versus a prohibition type of approach, which we don't think would be effective to eliminate the illegal marketplace. So why are we here? In 2025, we introduced legislation to legalize iGaming in Virginia. Again, it was a very short hearing, and we said we'd send it to the Gaming Commission, had that commission be set up, or if not, at least to this committee. As Chairman Reeves said, you guys in some ways are sort of standing in for the commission while we continue to work on getting it stood up. I do think today's presentations will help make the case for why a gaming commission is necessary. And we see a lot of how all these different forms of gaming in Virginia, interact, and having them in different silos, with different regulators doesn't really make sense for the Commonwealth or the consumer. Just to run through the bill for you guys a little bit, I'm not going to try and read it all to you. I know you got a tight schedule, but a couple of key definitions and how this would work under our piece of legislation. So you essentially have two kinds of licenses. You have gaming operators who get an internet gaming operator license. There would be Virginia land-based casinos that would be the operators, and they'd pay for a license to offer internet gaming. And then you have suppliers. We don't expect that the land-based casinos would set up all the infrastructure. There are a lot of folks that already have really good gaming interfaces that they can turn on. And so those would be your internet gaming suppliers. That's the consumer-facing entity that, with the example of sports books, your DraftKings, your FanDuels, your MGMs, your Hard Rocks, all that stuff, they have their own apps. And so the land-based casino would get a license, and then you'd have people that would be licensed to service those casinos with internet apps, essentially. In 2025 legislation, we gave the Lottery Board oversight of iGaming. Of course, there was no gaming commission. The legislation I plan to introduce in 2026 will ensure that it falls under the jurisdiction of the Gaming Commission. You can also have regulations through temporary licenses through the lottery. So if it's taking the commission time to get set up, we can begin the process in the lottery and have a process for it to move over to the Gaming Commission once that is in place. Just some scenarios about the way the revenue could work. Typically, the land-based casinos pay zero in license renewals. The suppliers, again, that they work with agree to pay both. So part of the deal is that if you want to be one of our list of suppliers, you're going to help us out with our land-based fees, our application fees. And again, what's sort of typical and what's proposed in this legislation would be an annual $1 million license, but you could do longer term licenses and charge more. So again, we just threw out a couple of possible scenarios there to give you an idea of the order of magnitude as far as revenue that's available from issuing these licenses. The supplier or the platform provider license, again, this is what the consumer-facing app folks would pay. And again, there's a couple of different options for what kind of revenue you could talk about doing for that. But that's the kind of revenue that is predictable. It can come in early. Again, you can charge more upfront for a longer-term license, and that would give the Gaming Commission itself sort of a steady source of revenue to help you guys get stood up as a commission and know that you have the funds to pay for your ongoing operations. I think iGaming would be a good way to get that seed money planted. Okay, so the way it would work, again, is so the casino then would have the option of setting up 3 supplier licenses. They could partner with we suspect most of them would set up one of their own apps, their own branded app, like a Bet Rivers app or a Hard Rock Casino app or whatever. So that's why we sort of list supplier 1 as the casino's in-house. In column 2 and 3, then they can contract and folks can compete to be a supplier for any of the land-based casinos. And so it gives you an opportunity to sort of spread the wealth, as it were, and for a lot of folks to participate in the market. But it's all running through those land-based casinos, so it's subject to that regulation and oversight. And we know, so there's a physical place to go to make sure that things are being done properly. If they're violating the rules, if they're not holding up their end of the bargain, we know they're here in Virginia, and you know who to hold accountable for it, as opposed to the folks that are doing it currently from offshore. Again, another flow chart, because we love charts to show you all how this is going to go. So the operators of the casino, they select up to 3 suppliers to partner with. The supplier provides the platform directly to consumers, and then only legal-age gaming participants would be able to participate in the games. A couple of things that are built in. First, we'd have age and identity requirements and verification, including geolocation. So every transaction would have to take place through a registered account where folks would have an opportunity to verify that you're dealing with somebody who's at least 21 years old, identify that their location is they're in the right place where they're supposed to be. Would have the voluntary exclusion programs that we currently have. So if you don't trust yourself, or if you want to set up your app to put some limits on it. Again, right now, none of that exists in what's currently being done offshore, right? And there's no obligation for them to do any of that. And then we'd have geolocation technology, again, to restrict play in prohibited locations. So you could even fence off certain areas geographically where we say we don't want iGaming here, we don't want people on their phones for whatever reason. You could set up physical parameters for where it can happen as well. Again, there'd be consumer protections built in, including a 24/7 problem gaming hotline, allows users, again, to set their own parameters, allows operators to implement monitoring and intervention capabilities. So again, they can sort of see what's going on. They can use their algorithms and so forth to say, hey, wait a second, this person doesn't seem to have the means to bet this way, or this pattern seems like they're going into a downward spiral. And we can set up prohibitions to sort of help them snap out of it, put them on pause and so forth. Tax structure, again, there'll be we've proposed a tax rate in the bill. Again, I suspect that the Gaming Commission may want to weigh in on that, the legislature, the appropriators. But again, Virginia's wagered an estimated $16 billion in the illegal, unregulated casino market in 2024. So again, this is revenue that's not being accessed by the Commonwealth. We're not touching, we're getting 0% now. And again, creating this structure doesn't create the ability for folks to gamble online. They're already doing it to the tune of $16 billion. The iGaming market could generate an estimated $5.3 billion in taxable revenue over the first 5 years. So again, there's revenue there to be taxed. Again, the $16 billion, a lot of that comes in and out, right? And people win back and so forth. But there's a good $5.3 billion in revenue that we could tax at whatever rate the General Assembly deems appropriate for that. And that is the end of my slides. I hope I know I can talk fast. I'm only about halfway through my time, so I have any questions. Or give my time to the presenters.
Senator Eben.
Thanks for the presentation. Delegate Simon, I just was curious, your bill contemplated $1 million licensing fee, and I was curious if you know if any other states are licensing at a higher fee or what kind of fees they charge for licensing.
Yeah, so we've looked at what the other states do. I don't know exactly what their amounts are, but we didn't pull that number out of thin air. That's sort of what the market for this kind of license is roughly in that range. But again, we also had a proposal you could do a 5-year license for $8 million. That's more than $1 million a year. So I think the market will bear that kind of a licensing fee. There's enough money available through this iGaming, if we bring it through legal channels, then I think those licensing fees are, again, within the realm of what the industry sort of expects to see.
Okay, and if I could follow up, Mr. Chair. You mentioned that they could participate in a voluntary exclusion program. I was wondering if there are any other protections for problem gamblers, because it's a little different if you, 3 in the morning can be doing this on your couch and when you're in a desperate situation versus driving to a casino and whatever protections they have.
Yeah, so there's a tutorial. So there are some things where you're going to have to go through some, depending on what happens. And I'm open to suggestions in the legislation for whatever specifics and how we want to get in there. Or maybe something, again, that the Gaming Commission could sort of say, hey, here's what the program needs to look like. Here's what your problem gaming program needs to look like. But we do have things like video tutorials. And again, there are things that are sort of algorithmic, right? Where, hey, it's 3 in the morning where you are, and you're sitting here and you've been playing slots for 2.5 hours and you continue to lose money and refresh your shopping cart, right? You can say, hey, wait a second. That identifies a problem. And again, put them on pause or force them to go through a video tutorial about problem gaming and so on and so forth. So those kinds of tools exist. Again, I don't have all the specifics on how they'd work, but you'd want to do that. And again, we'd also have funds for Virginia's state-based, not the casino-based, but a state-based problem gambling program that folks could be referred to. And so this would be a source of funds and support for that.
Delegate Simon, Delegate Bova.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess, Delegate Simon, kind of two questions that I had for you, and this might cue it up for others who are going to be speaking later. In terms of the operating model, where you would have a land-based casino and then they have 3 outward-facing suppliers, is that pretty standard with respect to how other states that have legalized this have done it, or are there also other examples of how this might be structured so you're not relying on a bricks and mortar facility?
There are other models that exist. I'll probably defer to some of the later presenters to get more on that. But my understanding is this is a fairly typical model. We're not inventing a new wheel here. We're not creating something that's from scratch. But we like the idea of supporting our state-based casinos for a couple of reasons. And one is you saw the stats about how when they work together in concert, it actually helps support the casinos and also job creation at the casinos. They seem to do better. In the states where they've paired it like that, the land-based casinos have seen better results and more job creation. So we like that model, but of course, we're open to seeing what other folks do.
Gotcha. And Mr. Chairman, and I think this is a little along the lines of your exchange with Senator Eben. But can you talk a little bit more about the specifics in your bill in terms of when and how you cut somebody off, based on the algorithms or an indication that there's a problem, and maybe this is something I'll have to ask later, but that is something where you can lose a lot of money very, very quickly, and I would want to make sure that there's pretty robust triggers, not just to have a tutorial, but to actually be able to cut you off.
Yeah, and I don't know that the legislation gets super specific about it, except to say that the programs would need to be established. And again, somebody has more specifics on that. You might hear more about that later. But I agree with you. I think that one of the real reasons that I'm supporting a bill to bring this under a legal umbrella is it gives us the opportunity to regulate it and build out that kind of robust consumer protection, robust anti-problem gambling features that we'd want. Now, to some degree, right, if you make it too robust, are you chasing folks back to the illegal market? Hey, this stupid app keeps timing out on me. I'm going to go back to my offshore version of it. But I think that there's a lot of reasons people would prefer to use one that is a legal one that's licensed by the state of Virginia, gives you some confidence that if you win your bets, you'll actually get paid and so forth. So I think given those trade-offs, people would prefer a legal, regulated, consumer-protected, taxed market. And we're also that gives us the opportunity, since they prefer that, right, to build in these robust problem gambling protections in a way that the current providers, and there are current providers that are offshore, don't do.
Delegate Simon, I'm going to turn it to Delegate Kresick in a second, but I just want to tell you, I couldn't agree more about the enforcement side. That's the biggest problem we have overall is enforcement on all gaming. We don't have any enforcement right now till we get the VGC set up. We have some legislation that Delegate Kresick and I passed along with your help, but it doesn't have enough teeth. So I agree with you on that. I do have a question on your bill specifically, lines 160 through 162. I just want to know, it says, I'll just read it. So internet gaming operator, internet gaming platform provider shall be permitted to offer live internet game simulcast from any live internet game studio premises in any location. Live internet game studios shall not be required to be located in the Commonwealth. I want it all to be located in the Commonwealth. If we're going to talk about creating jobs or anything else, I think that going forward, that's going to be a sticking point with me is why give it to New Jersey or give it to New York or someone else? And then the other question I had was, you talked about geolocating, and that's a problem. Can't we geolocate the whole Commonwealth of Virginia as far as keeping the offshore guys out? I don't know the technology. I'm asking because you're kind of the expert.
I think I think that's the apps would have to build in the geolocation, right? So right now, if I go to sometimes depending on where I'm standing, I got a friend who's got a place on the river. And, depending on where I'm standing, I can't use my sportsbook app. If geolocation decides I'm in Maryland and not Virginia, but that's built into the apps themselves. So we can't geolocate somebody else's app or one of the offshore folks.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Kresick.
Thank you, Delegate Simon. Just to follow up on the chairman's point, I do believe of the 7 or 8 states that are up, only one has language like the language that you're presenting. The other 7 require those jobs to be in those states. So that might be something to take a look at. Regarding Delegate Bulova's questions, I just wanted to follow up, and one of the I think one of the positives, if you will, about this iGaming is that unlike going into a casino where you're an anonymous player, you go in, they check your ID, but they're not writing down who you are when you come in. But they check to make sure you're not, self-excluded or underage or other issues. And but you could go in there and you could lose your shirt, right? On the beauty, I think, of if you were looking for a positive here for iGaming, one of the beauties of it is that it's not anonymous, that you have to give your social security number because for tax purposes, that you have to have your ID and everything. Of course, you're checking to make sure they're 21 and they're not on a self-exclusion list. But I also think it's an opportunity to really have those robust triggers that Delegate Bulova mentioned to make sure that people are playing this for entertainment purposes, not to lose their shirt. And if there's, if you find that someone's dropping a lot of money and it's unusual and that they normally bet $100 a night or something like that, and now they're, losing a couple thousand, that it should lock them out. There should be, so I hope by the time we come to session that we've got some really good language and best practices in there to make sure that's the case. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I agree. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair. And we're open to all kinds of suggestions. And none of this is set in stone. And in fact, that's part of the reason we sent it here was to get y'all's feedback. And you guys are the experts on gaming as far as in the legislature is concerned. And so I think we're happy to be flexible. I know I'm certainly happy to be flexible. And we don't have a monopoly on good ideas. And so if there are better ideas, better ways to do it, or if we want to keep the jobs and the piece of it in-house, those are all conversations that we can have through the legislative process. And I don't think there's anything that's off the table.
Thank you. Any other members? Delegate Simon, thank you so much for your presentation and coming back. Very thorough. Thank you. Next, we have a presentation, pros and cons of iGaming and problem gaming update from Keith White, founder and president of Safe Gambling Strategies, LLC. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator Reeves. Thank you, Delegate Kresick and members of the Joint Subcommittee. Thank you for the invitation to testify before the Joint Subcommittee, as you say, on the pros and cons of iGaming, as well as the status of problem gambling services in Virginia. I founded my firm, Safer Gambling Strategies, in January 2025 to promote responsible gambling and prevent gambling addiction. My list of clients is in my written statement, but as brief background, I previously served as executive director of the National Council on Problem Gambling from 1998 to 2025. Prior to that, I was director of research for the American Gaming Association and held positions at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the American Bar Association. I'm a graduate of Hampden City College, and I live in Arlington, Virginia. My remarks and recommendations today are not on behalf of any client or organization, but are based on my 3 decades of experience in the gambling field and to help this committee and my state address these important issues. Overall, I strongly support the creation of the Virginia Gaming Commission. And in relation to the VGC, I'll address the pros and cons of iGaming as well as the status of problem gambling services in Virginia. So on the pros and cons of iGaming, there's 3 that I've identified today out of the many that this important policy discussion deserves. But sticking primarily to the responsible gambling space, one of the first advantages is moving the players out of the illegal market. Illegal gambling operators provide no consumer protections and, of course, do not contribute to Virginia's Problem Gambling Treatment and Support Fund. They often target minors and self-excluded individuals. The illegal market is big business. How much so, nobody knows, but the American Gaming Association recently reported $18.6 billion in illegal iGaming revenue nationwide, with only 1 in 4 online gamblers playing exclusively on legal sites. The Campaign for Fair Gambling reports much higher revenue figures to the illegal market, but similarly estimates that illegal operators control roughly 75% of that market. Channeling existing players from the black market to the legal regulated space is undoubtedly to everyone's advantage and a major advantage of the Virginia Gaming Commission. So the second pro is using technology to promote safer gaming. And this is really where I specialize and will provide the majority of my remarks. Regulated online gambling platforms, as we've heard this morning already, have advanced tools to detect and address risky gambling behaviors before harm occurs. For example, New Jersey's Division of Gaming Enforcement, and I know Dave is here, Dave Rebuck is here, requires operators to monitor for indicators such as rapid betting, chasing losses, or extended sessions, and to provide timely interventions to take proactive steps when risky patterns emerge. Players could be encouraged and even incentivized to take control through deposit limits, time limits, budget calculators, and personalized activity dashboards. Meanwhile, innovations in digital health, such as teletherapy, recovery apps, and gambling-specific blocking software, are making world-class treatment services more accessible than ever. Self-exclusion systems, as we've heard already this morning, now allow secure encrypted enrollment online across all licensed operators in the state and ideally across the country. Operators in Virginia and the lottery are talking to providers of such systems, and I believe there's a great opportunity for us to join even before or if we adopt iGaming. But of course, my third point around iGaming is that there's certainly harm associated with it. There is definitively a higher risk of gambling problems in iGaming. Research consistently shows iGaming is associated with an elevated risk for gambling addiction. The recently published data from the 2024 National Survey of Gambling Attitudes and Gambling Experiences, conducted by my former organization, National Council on Problem Gambling, just confirms these trends. And as all research shows, the highest rates of problems are found among 18 to 35-year-old male online gamblers, both in Virginia and nationwide. Will Engage also suggests risky gambling behavior has leveled off since its pandemic-era increase. It is far too early to assume that rates are stable, or that the impact of new expanded technology might not exacerbate either the rate or severity of gambling problems. However, advertising growth, mobile betting expansion, and illegal operators remain risk factors, regardless of what we do here in Virginia, but it's being balanced somewhat by the increased services, funding, improved public awareness, and better treatment access. So my recommendations for the Virginia Gaming Commission, again, which I strongly support, and certainly Delegate Simon talked to this, there is best practice in online responsible gambling. It's developed by the National Council on Problem Gambling, started in 2015. Those best practice standards are the Internet Responsible Gambling Standards. Should be a baseline requirement in this legislation and for all online gambling, including online sports betting. These standards ensure informed decision-making, responsible marketing, and proactive support for at-risk players. And independent audits can and should verify operator compliance. As my old boss at the AGA used to say, trust but verify. Second recommendation would be to include all forms of online gambling in the VGC mandate, including daily fantasy sports, social casinos, and sweepstakes. For those of you that are not deeply involved in the gambling field, these are areas of online gambling activity that are not generally regulated as such, and therefore pose a lot of risk factors, dilute a lot of players from the legal regulated market, and contribute to harm while not contributing to the problem gambling funds. Generally, they lack any sort of responsible gambling provisions as well. The VGC should share compliance and exclusion data across jurisdictions, as discussed, coordinate public education about legal versus illegal operations, and aggressively crack down on the legal market. Just as a side note, consumer confusion around what's legal and what's not in the online gambling space is legion. A recent study in Mississippi found 60% of students in the Mississippi higher college system reported they were gambling legally online. Online gambling is not legal in Mississippi. So whatever those 60% of kids were doing, definitively, it is at least unregulated, if not illegal. And there's a massive, massive problem. And not surprisingly, that is that same high-risk age group of young, primarily male online gamblers. So as Senator Reeves said, enforcement is key, and the role of a Virginia Gaming Commission in enforcing our existing laws, as well as helping sort out what's legal and what's not, is critical for our state. My third and final recommendation on the iGaming side is to make sure that the Virginia Gaming Commission includes a director of responsible gambling, modeled on the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, who is responsible for developing and enforcing a statewide responsible gambling framework and coordinating with all stakeholders. As I'll talk about in the next session, right now we're in the early days of gambling, and right now the responsibility for both problem gambling, responsible gaming, and gambling itself is far too diffuse. It's across so many agencies and areas, and there needs to be a lot more coordination. And a director of responsible gaming at the VGC could play a big role in coordinating. I was also asked to provide an update on problem gambling services, and I commend the General Assembly for including in House Joint Resolution 10 a mandate for the Virginia Gaming Commission to effectively prioritize problem gambling prevention treatment efforts. You may be surprised to learn most state gambling commissions do not have such a mandate. In fact, there's only a handful in the entire country who have a specific consumer protection and responsible gambling focus. In most states, it's just simply counting the money and cracking down on illegal operators. And so consumer protection is left to someone else at best. This is critical as prior to the legalization of casinos, the problem gambling services infrastructure here in Virginia was rudimentary. And while it's growing since, it's still nascent and the growing pains are evident. Because gambling addiction has long existed in Virginia, but with the expansion of gambling, the introduction of state-funded problem gambling prevention and awareness programs, and increased promotion of the helpline number by all stakeholders, calls have skyrocketed. And I'd like to emphasize this point. Calls to the helpline are driven by many things. They are driven by rates of gambling problems, but they're also driven by promotion and public awareness. People don't call a helpline if they don't know it exists. And prior to the expansion of casinos, very little publicity of the helpline was being conducted. Now, with, frankly, saturation advertising, I see the helpline number constantly on TV. That's a good thing. And so helpline calls can be driven by many things. And so I just think that's really important because the increase has been incredible. Between 2019 and 2024, total calls have increased 1,500%. And intakes, which is a much more accurate barometer for intakes, which are actual calls for help, increased by 223%. Many of those other calls, they all have to be answered as if they are a crisis call, but they may be calling for what the winning number is tonight, or what's on the buffet, or I've got a problem with my Players Club card. But again, they all have to be answered as if they are crisis calls. But the crisis calls themselves have increased roughly 223%. While most who gamble will not suffer harm, which is very important to remember, this is unlike opioids or tobacco. This is much more like alcohol, where the vast majority of people who drink will not develop an alcohol problem. People who do develop a problem, every Virginian deserves access to effective problem gambling prevention, treatment, and recovery support. Since 2019, we've built a publicly funded problem gambling services from scratch. But unfortunately, the state has largely excluded the expertise of the Virginia Council on Problem Gambling, on whose board I serve. They represent prevention, treatment, research, and recovery stakeholders. Nevertheless, VCPG continues to maintain the helpline and has developed a best-in-class, highly effective peer program connecting help seekers with treatment and recovery services. It is truly a national model, and being able to engage with these peers who have suffered from a gambling problem themselves, who've walked through that fire, but are willing to then dedicate their life to help others who are struggling get connected with the resources we have, is incredibly inspiring. And in most states, the nonprofit state councils receive substantial funding from state and operators to implement statewide evidence-based programs much more effectively and cost-efficiently than state government. This is not a dig on public service. This is just to recognize that often the private sector we've found in almost every area, including health resources, is more nimble, is able to respond more quickly than a state agency, which is constrained in many ways. Ideally, there's a partnership and a division of responsibilities. As an example, centralizing public awareness campaigns through VCPG would create a consistent statewide brand and more efficient use of funds. And if properly resourced, VCPG could ease the workload on the Community Services Board, which is already stretched thin. I'm a former member of the Arlington Community Services Board, and I can tell you that problem gambling is not and will not ever be their main priority. And the CSB system is fantastic. There's a lot of great people doing very good work, but they have many bigger issues to address. And for their entire existence, until the last few years, they've been dedicated on substance abuse, mental health, and behavioral health issues. It is not always the most effective policy to take an agency which has, frankly, not ever addressed problem gambling and then start to funnel a lot of funds through it and expect them to do a bang-up job. Again, not a criticism of CSBs in specific, but structure dictates results, and often the private sector can be a lot more efficient and effective in delivering those results through a purpose-built, specific, dedicated organization such as the Virginia Council. So continuing to exclude VCPG, contradicts national best practices, creates service gaps, and undermines the state's own commitment to the most effective problem gambling prevention and treatment. With the scarce resources we have, we need to be as efficient as we can. The $4 million roughly that we spend now is a huge improvement than what we've had, but it is still nowhere near enough to address the total scope of this problem statewide without really tapping into the specialty organizations in the private sector as well. So my recommendations for the Virginia Gaming Commission when it comes to problem gambling services are to make sure that VGC has funds for research on problem gambling, especially since, as good as the Problem Gambling Treatment Support Fund it does not specifically include research in its priorities. I mean, you can read it broadly to define, you could do research on treatment or prevention, but because it's not enumerated in statute, and as an old legislative guy, if it's not in the statute, it's probably important to have also an independent source of research. A VGC might look at things a lot differently than the Problem Gambling Support Fund would. This could and should include support for the Virginia Center on Gaming and Health to conduct strategic and nonpartisan research, benefiting individuals and families adversely impacted by their gambling through evidence-based prevention, education, and intervention programs. My last two recommendations around problem gambling services, specifically for the VGC. There's a great role for the VGC to hold other state agencies accountable, because VGC would be the sole state agency focused exclusively on gambling issues in Virginia. They could play a valuable role in ensuring coordination, cooperation, fulfillment of obligations by these other agencies who have a role in gambling, but it's not their primary responsibility or interest. And quite frankly, we know that when it's not in the agency's priority or interest, gambling is often seen as an unfunded mandate. And so I think we're getting a lot of slippage here that might be addressed through a co-equal state agency like VGC being able to examine the work of some of these other groups. And then last but not least, include VGC representatives on the Problem Gambling Advisory Task Force. This is a great group that operates somewhat informally. And I believe the VGC could help us formalize this group and create a statewide strategic plan to address problem gambling, balanced between prevention, education, treatment, research, and recovery, with shared responsibilities and shared funding between the public and private sector. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. White. Let me just say, and I can speak for my colleagues up here, problem gaming is probably one of the foremost things that we want to make sure we accomplish based on the rapid rate of what we see as an explosion. Delegate Kriesik and I often attend those. I guess just a blunt question to you is, so are you in support of iGaming? Are you not in support of it? You're in support of the VGC, obviously, but I'm trying to bracket you in and read between the lines. I know that in September of 18, you gave some testimony before the U.S. Senate talking about a lot of things, and I don't need to go through that, but you gave a warning shot to everyone about expanding. So today's testimony, you kind of alluded that, well, maybe we can do it if we do these sort of things, but I'm trying to figure out straight up, like, where are you?
That is now, I'm neutral on iGaming. So there are costs and benefits. I think if the decision is made to go ahead, there are ways to mitigate harm. There's a lot of harm we have to mitigate now if we don't legalize iGaming. So, I'm not trying to dodge the question, Senator, but I am neither for nor against legalized iGaming here in Virginia. If we do it, there's things we've got to address. If we don't do it, there's things we have to address. There's some channelization in the black market concerns if you don't legalize. There's obviously gambling addiction concerns if you do. I think it can be done in a way that it better balances the costs and benefits, but that's not where I don't personally have a stance on that one way or the other.
Thank you. Delegate Bullivan and then Delegate Creasy.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So one of the primary things, that I'm looking at is something that you had mentioned, something that Delegate Simon had mentioned in terms of starving the illegal market. One of the statistics that you presented that really got my attention was the fact that 60%, I think, of those Mississippi students didn't realize that they were engaging in the illegal market. And that to me is one of the big hurdles to overcome. And so I do want to make it very clear, that Virginia does have enforcement authority. I guess the question is whether that enforcement is enough or vigorous enough to be able to make a dent in that illegal market. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on kind of the play between enhanced enforcement and then helping to drive people to a legal market. Because my fear is that if we don't have that ramp up of enforcement, people aren't going to change their habits because they don't realize that they're doing something illegal and you're not starving that market. So can you speak to what level of enforcement or the resources we would need to put into enforcement in order to actually get people's attention? And whether that is something that's directed solely towards the platforms or whether we also need to make people accountable, with respect to their choice to use an illegal platform.
Thank you, Representative. It's a great question. There's some research out there that shows states with the Gaming Commission are doing more enforcement, issuing more cease and desist letters. I'm not aware of many states that don't have a unitary gaming commission like we're talking about here that have really moved aggressively against the illegal market. So a commission would help with enforcement. I think also this is not a problem you can enforce your way out of. The illegal market is always going to be there. There's always going to be internet access. There's always going to be tax advantages. No matter how low a jurisdiction taxes internet gambling, it's still a tax, and many of the offshore operators pay nothing. So you can't only rely on enforcement. There needs to be a broad, coordinated public education campaign. All stakeholders, including the legal industry, including the lottery, including churches, communities of faith, unions, everyone. We have to approach gambling issues and especially gambling addiction like we do with alcohol or opioids. Even though there are significant differences between alcohol and opioids, we recognize it's a whole state public health problem. And so you can't only tackle things like illegal market just narrowly. Enforcement is a big part of it. Trying to deliberately shift customers if they choose to gamble into the legal regulated market, as you say, is a big part of it. As Delegate Simon said, people should prefer to play with legal regulated operators when they know they're available in their state. And there's a lot that everybody can do to try and help Virginians understand what's legal, what's not. But it can't just be enforcement. We need to step up enforcement. I would love to see Virginia issue all those same cease and desist letters to some of the illegal operators that other states have done. But I do think, again, having a dedicated gaming commission is the first step towards getting that enforcement, if that answers your question.
Delegate Creasy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to set the record straight there. The lottery does do a lot of enforcement, and they do send a lot of cease and desist letters out. But that doesn't mean we can't do better. There's no doubt. And we need the resources. A lot of these resources are coming from the taxpayers. I would like to see them coming from the entities that are making all the money, right? So how do you see the Virginia Gaming Commission enhancing the enforcement, especially regarding these offshore groups?
I think there are so many ways that I've seen work in other states. One is just having an agency that's focused on this, that's their sole purpose. So it's time, it's resources, it's the relationship that a commission would have with the Attorney General's office. As a statutory agency, they would be able to go directly to law enforcement and be able, in some states, there's a direct relationship with the AG's office. In other states, it goes through, local prosecutors. But either way, there's at least a government-to-government relationship there to be able to prioritize some of these issues. Because quite frankly, what I hear in other states and what I hear from law enforcement here in Virginia is that this is seen as gambling rules are seen as one of the least important. It's almost a victimless crime. And I'm not saying it's the most important thing, but I think there's a level of rigor that would be applied when a commission's asking its counterpart, rather than just a citizen, or rather than waiting on the already overburdened law enforcement agencies to pick this up on their own. And I think there's a lot of other ways. Again, coordination with other agencies. This is not just an AG problem. This is we need to do better education. We need to do better public awareness. There's a lot of, almost every agency of government here could and should be involved in gambling and problem gambling issues.
I just want to. One of the problems we have in Virginia is we haven't given lottery the statutory authority to issue injunctions and cease and desist letters in some situations. So that's something we need to look at. And you mentioned some good ideas that we can enhance our bill here on Virginia Gaming Commission. But I also just want to, and since you've testified before the Congress, you have a good knowledge of all of the problems that are that gaming can lead to. And I don't want to minimize the fact that it's like victimless, because we know that of all the addictions, gaming leads to suicide more than any other addiction. We also know that that the federal government has never put a penny into problem gambling. So I just wanted to make that clear. But I think if you'd like to wrap it up, maybe any last comments, if there's any. Do we have anybody else that wants to ask a question? All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That was the comments about a victimless crime in relation to the way law enforcement often looks at this. No, I've spent 30 years fighting for programs and services for problem gamblers. I think your points are absolutely correct. And problem gambling is a devastating disorder, and we can't. There's not enough that we can do here in Virginia to address that. But just to be clear, law enforcement often sees it a victimless crime. I do not.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Dave Rebuck, who is the past director of the New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me, Chair Krizik and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me here today to discuss my experiences overseeing regulated online gambling in the state of New Jersey. Again, my name's Dave Rebuck. Before my retirement last year, I served for 13 years under 2 different governors as director of the Division of Gaming Enforcement and Assistant Attorney General in charge of that program. I was appointed in 2011. In October of 2013, 2 years into my term, the state authorized and launched the nation's first competitive iGaming market. So let me assure you, I'm not some crazy Jersey guy here tell you what to do, because I do respect everything that you have before you to do in this very complicated area. Also know, my wife's a graduate of William & Mary, and I once lived at Radford as assistant to president at Radford University. High degree of respect for what you do in Virginia. I've been exposed to the debate, legalization, enforcement, and successes of iGaming in New Jersey and other jurisdictions, and look forward to sharing my insights with the committee as you contemplate enacting a similar market structure here in Virginia. So first, some background and context. Gaming in New Jersey is famously concentrated in the casinos of Atlantic City, as required by the state's constitution. In turn, gaming is the lifeblood of that city, drives its economy, and provides a significant tax revenue to the state, supporting services for its most vulnerable residents, persons with disabilities, and senior citizens. As with any form of advancement and progress, some in the state were very wary of a new technology such as iGaming that would impact the status quo of the casino operations therein. There were fears that casino workers would lose their jobs and that the supporting industries around the casinos would suffer. I imagine that you're hearing some of the similar fears in your positions. Throughout my 13 years as director of DGE, a tenure that spanned before and after the introduction of iGaming, iGaming demonstrated itself to be complementary to the existing forms of gaming and critical to sustaining the growth of the land-based casinos. The same experience holds true across states that have implemented iGaming since that time, especially those states that have required online gaming operators, as your bill does, to tether directly to any existing land-based casino or casino. The casino holds a monopoly on the expansion to iGaming. Multiple studies have shown that iGaming, in fact, boosts land-based casino growth rates by an average of about 2% annually. Related surveys found that the presence of iGaming boosts interest from a much wider and more diverse adult customer base, that all forms of gaming, including the land-based gaming options, currently are available there. New Jersey, of course, offers a tethered model of iGaming in which all iGaming flows through the casinos in Atlantic City, as required by the Constitution, like the framework proposed here in Virginia. This gives casinos the opportunity to cross-market their gaming, food, entertainment options to a broader group of potential customers, while simultaneously providing casinos with business opportunities to partner with experienced nationwide online gaming operators who want to engage in the state. In New Jersey, as other states, iGaming both saved and then expanded jobs. Across all iGaming states, jobs supported by the land-based casino industry grew by an annual average of 9.4% from 2017 to 2022. When comparing job growth in the iGaming states versus non-iGaming states as a control group, the iGaming states outperformed the non-iGaming states by anywhere from 1% to 5% per year. In addition to boosting land-based casino jobs, Jersey has an additional 1,800 direct iGaming jobs added since its legalization. I want to expand on something Senator Reeves asked. He identified a provision in your bill that mandates the live dealer studios be located in your state. We don't have that in New Jersey. I can assure you because the attorneys are here, I made a direct appeal to two of the largest live dealer studios in our state to filter all work through our state to new states. I was rejected. They will not do it. There may be others who want that to occur. You can have a chance of dealing with it, but I can assure you the two largest live dealer operations in the state of New Jersey, which generate many hundreds of jobs, not thousands, have rejected that concept and are prepared to expand on a state-by-state basis. Among the multitude of benefits that iGaming brings to the states, its ability to combat the illegal market. Over the lifespan of my career as a regulator and an assistant attorney general, the rise of the illegal market has been staggering. With this comes incredible risk to consumers who are exposed to unsafe and unregulated platforms, as you've heard earlier. Today, though, every state, including New Jersey, has illegal online licenses and unregulated and untaxed online gaming operations within its borders. The enforcement tools that are needed to combat that are critical for your bill. The state of New Jersey, I was very fortunate as an assistant attorney general. Assigned to me were 50 state troopers and a half a dozen criminal prosecutors working for me in the Division of Gaming Enforcement. Question I think that Delegate Krizik asked, well, who's going to pay for that? In New Jersey, the industry pays for that. My budget was $70 million. $70 million. And that's a lot larger than what you're proposing in New Jersey. I mean, what you're proposing in Virginia. But that's all public information. And the industry pays for everything. Casinos, sports wagering, online gambling, they all have their share, equally divided, audited, and accounted for. Not a single penny of state tax dollars supports the gaming industry's regulation in the state of New Jersey. So what does this mean for you as policymakers? Based on my experience, there's proof in concept to taking a multi-pronged approach to cracking down on the illegal market, with legalization being a critical component to every approach. But let's not fool ourselves. Unless we have tremendous support and collaboration between government agencies, including the federal government, the status quo of the illegal market and the offshore sites that are engaged in businesses in every state are not going to go away. Now, we saw a letter was referenced from the state attorney generals. I referenced one, I wrote one earlier to the Department of Justice. It's going to take a lot of work, but the status quo to be upset has to be coordinated and collaborated with the federal government beyond the Department of Justice. It includes aspects such as Department of Treasury, Department of Commerce, Department of State. We're dealing with international relations. It's not an easy job, but if you put your fair share of enforcement tools together and you work with your attorney general on what he or she needs, what your state police believes they need to do the work that needs to be done to approach these actions either criminally or in a high civil matter, as you've referenced, those tools can be built into your standards and expectations for being a partner in taking on this huge responsibility. Having worked closely with many of the legal operators interested in offering iGaming in Virginia, it's my capacity as director in TGE, I can attest that the work that goes into ensuring there are safety measures in place to ensure legal markets grow responsibly. Many of these operators today that are regulated and trusted in New Jersey already. New Jersey worked with your lottery to get your sports wagering up and running. And under the current leadership of Khalid Jones, you do a really good job. What can be done in the future rests with you. I know you're looking at having a separate commission. There's no doubt in my mind that this state has dipped its toes into online gambling in many ways. You license daily fantasy sports. You have sports wagering that's online. You have daily fantasy sports. You have horse racing that is done through the internet. So most of those agencies that oversee that are maybe not as coordinated as they should be in working together and cooperatively, and possibly what you're suggesting, and I would suggest that it's a very strong position to have a separate uniform agency that ensures there's uniformity in regulations and protections and safeguards and consumer protections is a very good step. In New Jersey, we started to move in that direction. We're not there yet. But I think with the expansion of all gambling options available to people today, including the gray market with the sweepstakes that's going on that you're faced with, prediction markets to the federal government, these are new forms of gambling that in some way are going to have to be dealt with. In New Jersey, I think, join us. We just passed the sweepstakes law that bans sweepstakes, okay? We are at the forefront of litigation against federal government to stop prediction markets. They will not go away by just sitting on the sidelines. So you have that to look forward to also, and I would say that you can look to our sweepstakes law to allow for powers to be provided to your commission that would help them in doing things more broadly than maybe what you think is being done today. So in conclusion, states that have implemented iGaming, including my own, have been able to realize meaningful revenue and responsibly offering online gaming, drawing a business away from illegal operators. But I can assure you, illegal operators still exist. We have studies that are from the American Gaming Association that, we've captured the mainstream market, but there's still about 10% of the people that will not utilize the mainstream market for whatever reason, because it's very easy to do so, as you've heard from others. I'm pleased that Virginia may soon see similar benefits. I'm happy to provide whatever assistance may be helpful based on my experience and expertise as you undertake this effort. It's a laudable one. You're headed in the right direction. I thank you for your time. Best luck in the future, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have to help you further.
Thank you, Mr. Rebuck. Delegate Bullock, you want to start?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have a series of questions, if that's okay with you. First of all, a statement, go tribe, and please tell your wife, hark upon the gale from the Commonwealth of Virginia. I guess was hoping you could dive into a little bit more about what you saw as the impact of legalization and enforcement on the illegal market. And so it sounds to me like you were able to move the needle. So I just wanted to confirm that, and also wanted to see, I think to the earlier speaker's point, what combination of enforcement versus education or other mechanisms did you use in order to be able to get people off the illegal market and into the legal market?
Yeah, you can't just rely on enforcement itself. You've highlighted an important part of education. We found that more education needs to be done at a younger age, certainly with the risk of gambling, whether it's done online or not. And, various legal forms of gambling today exist at the age of 18. Of course, what we're talking about won't exist until the age of 21. However, the experiences that youngsters, for a better word, gain engaged in legal forms of gambling at a time when they like to take risks just empowers them to make decisions especially with the availability of technology at their disposal today, to be entertained or look into doing things that are essentially not legal. And so education is a critical component. I am from the education world. I believe that. You've heard earlier studies that were done and mandated in New Jersey that Keith referenced to help us learn and then move in areas with sister agencies or the operators to then mandate certain forms of education that they do, but more importantly, that could be done in other arenas through the Department of Education, for example. As far as enforcement, I think I made it very clear. You need to be a partner at the table. You need to ensure that your law enforcement agency feels comfortable in doing what they have the tools. We have a lot of tools in the state of New Jersey because essentially I was an assistant attorney general and I reported to the attorney general, and we, as you know, I had the staff too. That was not enough to combat the illegal market. We did great intelligence research. We found things, cease and disorders, all the things that you've referenced, Delegate Krizek. You need those tools at your disposal. And if you don't have an Attorney General's office that is directly engaged or supported in the work of the DGC, I think you're losing an opportunity to be more effective in the role you play. But don't underestimate the ability of the federal government to go and change the status quo. We've heard numerous examples that they're really not engaged in gambling, either through support services, as you mentioned, problem gambling and responsible gambling, or with enforcement. The Department of Justice has other priorities. But if the status quo is to be changed, it has to be more than just the Department of Justice. They need to be with you. But as we've seen in this administration anyway, when a desire is to upset the status quo and change things with countries, international affairs, there are actions that are being taken that have wide-ranging powers that aren't done today. Will that be something that is of interest? Certainly worth to have the dialogue when you get at the table. So.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I guess second question deals with the issue of tethering to a land-based casino versus, I guess, having a system that's completely online or independent. And I know you had mentioned one of the benefits of that was to help shore up the brick and mortar casinos. Can you speak about some of the other issues involved in that, and whether that's important for other reasons than just supporting the land-based casinos?
Yeah, and the beauty of it is that there's certainly an economic development concept that I've referenced, but it goes beyond that. It's not just economic development. Our state made a huge commitment to ensure that our casinos are strong and able to provide entertainment services to citizens that the citizens desire. You hear a lot of discussion, about what they call cannibalization. Well, what people don't talk about in the state of New Jersey is that our casinos, in order to be successful, needed additional tools and opportunities to market their products than just the traditional retail. For this reason, and this reason only. You probably don't know, but there are today, and when I was there, a dozen retail casinos that are on our border from Delaware, Pennsylvania, to New York. Ben Franklin once said, New Jersey is a keg, tapped at two ends. The gaming industry tapped New Jersey hard, preventing people from coming in, because gaming is really a regionalized activity for consumers, and also drawing people out. And you may not know this, but there may be 3 additional land-based casinos in the New York metropolitan market. A state that is competing with that type of size on its borders as fortresses for gambling, that is a tough challenge. And without what we did here, that I referenced in this period of time with sports wagering and winning that case with the feds and allowing that to occur, and without the ability to have an expanded type of online gambling through the casinos, we'd have less casinos today. No doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind. So if you look in the future for your land-based operation, you're really not in a mature market yet. You have 3 casinos. You're going to get 2 more soon. You're evolving. There are geographic regions that I am sure that people are going to come to you looking to expand to, because your state has 9 million people. We have 9 million people in New Jersey. We have 9 casinos in our state, let alone the 15 that are going to be on our border. So, yes, you have opportunities here. You're not as mature as our jurisdiction, but the lessons that you can learn from us, what we've done in iGaming for the last 15 years, and particularly Michigan and Pennsylvania, very robust markets, are going to be very valuable to you. And you can learn from our successes, but you can also not repeat what we did not as well as we should have. So you're in a great position moving forward.
Mr. Chairman, final question, and if I could just really briefly. So as you know, we don't have a Virginia Gaming Commission set up. We're struggling to make that happen. We also have a standalone bill that we are considering, and so we've got a timing issue that we're faced with. And so it sounds to me like you've had a chance to look through our legislation, and I wanted to get your perspective on how risky is it to have a standalone piece of legislation like this if we aren't able to also at the same time get the Virginia Gaming Commission stood up?
I've struggled in New Jersey with the balkanized approach to legalized gambling. Sister agencies, you want to work together. Different leaders, different needs, different concepts of what is important to their duties and responsibilities. A centralized oversight of gambling, legalized gambling, eliminates that and puts the responsibility and accountability on one group to deliver. And if Dave Rebuck was governor of the state of New Jersey, which I don't intend to be, I've whispered in other governors' ears before, we got to move in this direction, because if the casinos are doing good things in responsible gambling and problem gambling, and a sister agency that has another form of gambling. I'm not going to be critical of them, but horse racing or even the lottery or charitable gaming does nothing. It's still gambling. And the compendium of gambling is only going to expand and you can see it for yourself, it's expanding today as we're here. And to hold one group primarily responsible for doing the good things that you're suggesting and not having it uniform across the board for people is just going to be a problem for you. And yes, I would be very much supporting what you're doing. And I really don't see a downsize. I think the biggest question you're going to have is your lottery is really a state-run gambling entity. It regulates itself. Okay, I understand that may not want to be in the commission for legitimate reasons. I would just suggest that you at least ensure that whatever the others do under the VG, commission, Virginia Gaming Commission, that there's attention to those details by the lottery people to ensure that they safeguard the risk that is involved with that form of gambling too. That's all. And they can do it. They can do it.
Yes, sir. Senator McPike.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the question, I appreciate your time today and your presentation. One of the other presentations also mentioned iGaming jobs. Can you describe for me what an iGaming job is? Since it's sort of it's an app, it's anywhere. How does the state create jobs out of the Ethernet?
Very easy. When we started internet gaming, we were dealing with casinos that are land-based organizations that are entertainment businesses. They were not, in their wildest dreams, had the expertise internally to develop and implement iGaming. Okay, they didn't. So our decision was very clear. We're going to give them a monopoly, but their casino license is going to be sound. We don't have to see them again. We don't have to review them again. But where are these other entities that provide services going to come from? And in 2013, they're coming from Europe. They're definitely coming from Europe. Hundreds of companies wanting to get into the U.S. market. And you ask, well, what do you mean hundreds of companies? Well, for every online gambling platform, they're going to have geolocation services, specialized. Cybersecurity protections, specialized. They're going to have KYC, know your customer systems to protect. Responsible gaming systems that didn't exist had to be developed. And all these new jobs coming in were IT-based. These companies coming in doing gambling are internet companies. They are experienced in internet services, which land-based didn't have. So the land-based operators needed these partnerships to develop, or like Caesars acquired a company, William Hill. Hard Rock made a decision, we're not going to partner with anybody. We're going to create our own digital services bureau or company. All new jobs. And where are they going to be? Well, they got to be in the states where you're operating, okay? And so when I mention these jobs, they're IT jobs, and many of them are based in our state, not just in Atlantic City, but in Atlantic City we have a data center that is required to be there to funnel the trading, for a better word, and that was brand new development, new construction, and going to have it. So,
Mr. Chairman, I guess as a more precise follow-up, what specific parts of the New Jersey legislation require those jobs to be in New Jersey? I mean, a lot of these jobs can be anywhere, not in Virginia. If Virginia was to pursue it, right. Geofencing, I can do that remotely. I can figure that out pretty quickly, right? I can do problem gambling. I can set up all of this in Nevada, from New Jersey. These could be New Jersey jobs from Virginia iGaming. I'm just trying to, what was it from New Jersey's legislation that you felt created, I think it was quoted 1,000 jobs,
1,800.
1,800, so that would be 78 jobs per license.
Yep. We were first in.
Okay.
That's why.
Okay.
We don't have a requirement, as I mentioned to the senator. I tried. I wanted them desperately to stay. Now, the federal law, that was one thing I mentioned to you for iGaming, under the Wire Act, allows for compacts, compacting states to work together to share information and have the wagering across state borders. You're not going to lose money, but I'm just suggesting to you that the compact is a very valuable tool, particularly with certain types of games that will be popular. Think of Powerball, think of Mega Millions. Okay, you have peer-to-peer gambling games like poker that include the base of people who wish to engage. So you're not just having poker players in Virginia, you have poker players against poker players in other states. The money's easily identified and distributed, because another thing you have to build in is revenue certification standards, and you have to have the accountants, which we have 20 accountants. All we do is check money, protect the state, but also would ensure that the operators were paying their fair share and that we're not making mistakes and auditing the regulator. And all those systems are developed, and I can assure you they've been shared with states like Michigan, who copies them completely, in Pennsylvania, and they'd be available. We don't, our governor's made it very clear. You give these people everything they need to do it the right way, and we did. So that'd be available to Virginia if they so choose to go in that direction. So I hope that answers your question, but it's not me. We were just first in, and once you get established, I mean, if you can try to do exactly what you said, Senator, they're going to try. Of course. I thought I'd have a win. You told me, no, that's not our business model. We're going to go in every state because that's the way we work. Okay. I said, well, I lost that argument. I wish I had more jobs, but we didn't get them.
Anyone else?
Mr. Rebuck, thank you. You've given us a wealth of information, and Delegate Kriesik and I are scribbling as fast as we can over here to try to figure out how to put it all together. So,
If need be, I'm happy.
well, no sweepstakes. I got that one, but there's a bunch more. So, yeah, thank you, sir. All right, moving on. We come to a presentation on illicit iGaming operations in Virginia, its impact on other forms of gaming, the Sports Betting Alliance. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Or, yeah, still morning.
Still there, yes. Yes, good morning, everyone. For the record, my name is Michelle McGregor. I am the policy director at the York Law Firm and a national consultant for the Sports Betting Alliance, a coalition of leading online gaming platform providers, including Bet365, BetMGM, DraftKings, Fanatics, and FanDuel. It's a pleasure to be invited back to provide some insights on the state of online gaming, or iGaming, from the perspective of licensed, highly regulated online gaming operators, all of whom currently offer their sports betting product here in Virginia and are licensed across 39 other jurisdictions in the United States to provide any combination of sports betting and iGaming where it is authorized. I want to start by thanking Co-Chair Kriesik and Reeves for holding this committee hearing. I want to thank Delegate Margaret Simon and Senator Mimi Locke for championing legislation to address an incredibly important public policy issue and fiscal opportunity for Virginia. The SBA supported their legislation introduced last session, and I look forward to sharing some fresh data that illustrates the importance of states legalizing a very popular form of gambling entertainment while simultaneously taking action to eradicate unlawful online actors who target minors and vulnerable gamblers. They lack responsible gaming protections and generate no revenue for the state. You know, it's only been a year since I was last presenting to this committee, and in that short time, a lot of new data has become available. Today's presentation will highlight the top lines of this new information, including, first, the growth of iGaming market and the consumer sentiment, an update on the legal iGaming market performance and the forecast for Virginia, positive new insights into consumer behavior in states with legalized iGaming and brick-and-mortar casinos, and consumer protections in the regulated market. But if I leave you with one message today, let it be this. Legalizing, regulating, and taxing iGaming doesn't mean introducing iGaming to the state of Virginia. iGaming is very much already here. Delegate Simon and many of the presenters before me did a fantastic job articulating how pervasive the illegal market has become, and we're excited to talk about the benefits of legalizing this market. But first, let me start with the video that illustrates this best. Oh, how do Are you able to initiate the video?
You may have seen these celebrity ads.
WowVegas.com.
Play some roulette, to be honest.
Life's a beach at ChumbaCasino.com.
You'd never know they're promoting online sportsbooks and casinos that don't follow American gaming laws. These unregulated platforms are rampant across the U.S. Annually, it's estimated that Americans spend more on unregulated and unauthorized online sportsbooks and casinos than Google or Apple make in a year. Unregulated betting sites like Bovada and Chumba look just like regulated online casinos, but don't follow the same rules or offer the same protections. Often, American consumers don't even know they're making an unregulated bet. How did these unauthorized betting sites get away with it? Sites like Bovada use foreign offshore servers. Others, like Stake US, Chumba, and Wow, claim to use loopholes and call themselves social casinos to get around American iGaming rules. The result? These platforms dodge rules that ensure transparency and customer protections, not to mention billions in taxes. Worst of all, many of these unregulated sites don't follow gaming rules that protect minors. Some simply allow players to check a box that says they're over 18, without any further verification. Many platforms even encourage bets with virtual or cryptocurrency, which is easier for minors to access and harder for law enforcement to track. And these unauthorized betting sites aren't bound to any of the normal marketing rules that prevent gaming advertising to minors, avoiding important oversight. Online sports betting and iGaming in America should be transparent, regulated, and for adults only. But unauthorized platforms like Stake US, Bovada, and Chumba provide the opposite, operating in the shadows and outside of American laws that protect consumers. That's why 30 states and D.C. have established legal sports betting or iGaming frameworks to stop dangerous, unauthorized betting and to better protect consumers. And when they do, traffic to unauthorized sites drops dramatically. In a regulated market, platforms require proven age and identity verifications to stop minors from gaining access. Government agencies review and approve all regulated online sports betting and iGaming platforms to ensure they follow the laws and protect consumers. And when it comes to problem gaming, regulated platforms don't wait to act. They offer tools where customers can set spending and time limits. They train every staff member on how to detect at-risk behavior. And their products prominently feature responsible gaming resources and language. When it comes to transparency and consumer protection, the difference couldn't be starker. If you care about stopping dangerous, unauthorized betting, visit sportsbettingalliance.org.
Thank you. So obviously a long video, but it really underpins, I think, a lot of what we're talking about today is that when you see celebrities like Drake and Ryan Seacrest and Paris Hilton, your average consumer is going to be completely unaware of whether a product might be licensed or not. And if you're like me, driving around Virginia, I've seen advertisements for Stake at gas stations. You hear their advertisements on podcasts. And if you open up your phone app store and search for any of these companies, you'll experience firsthand how easy it is to download the app, check a box to confirm your age, and then start converting artificial cold coins for real currency payouts. Just quickly on the numbers, since I last reported on the illegal market last year, they've increased substantially. The American Gaming Association just came out with new numbers last month, estimating that Americans nationwide are betting $466 billion with unlicensed gaming operators. This is up 38% from 2022 when they last conducted their in-depth analysis. This number translates to roughly $18.6 billion in gross gaming revenue lost to the illegal market, up 37% from 2022. Specific to Virginia, the numbers break down according to two independent studies, one of the industry's adversaries estimates Virginians spend $16 billion on unregulated platforms, and the AGA estimated $12 billion. Obviously, it's an illegal market, so there's a range in estimates, but both numbers are incredibly high and signal a major problem with the status quo in Virginia. We've really addressed this, but this volume of consumer activity begs a fundamental question posed by a national economic research firm, which is, do people know if these platforms are unlawful? A survey of registered voters in Virginia concluded that 58% of voters believe that online casino is already legal. Later in the survey, when they were informed that it is not, in fact, legal, they shared that they really just want state governments to ensure online gaming platforms prevent children from gambling and have robust age verifications. And look, we've heard different schools of thought, but ultimately we believe fundamentally that the only way to achieve both of those is to regulate online gaming and only offer licenses to platforms that promote the strictest identity verification and know your customer safeguards. So with that in mind, I just want to switch to the state of the legal iGaming market. Focusing on the top three competitive markets, New Jersey, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, each of these jurisdictions have generated billions of dollars for their states since their respective markets launched. In these markets, I want to highlight that the addition of iGaming has helped bolster existing brick-and-mortar revenues. I included some case studies here, but former director Rebuck did a fantastic job articulating how iGaming was a net benefit to New Jersey. The casino market in between 2006 and 2016, the revenue was declining. Following the legalization of iGaming, the revenue trajectory turned around. If not for iGaming, casinos in New Jersey may have closed. Pennsylvania is another great case study. They also had stagnant or declining casino revenues when iGaming was legalized in 2017 and then subsequently launched in 2019. The revenue trajectory for casinos turned around. In fact, in 2024, the last full reporting year, Pennsylvania recorded record high gaming revenue for the state, up nearly 8% from 2023. While promising in itself, I think that data doesn't present the whole picture. I think the best validator for a complementary nature of iGaming and retail casinos comes from economic surveys that study consumer behavior. A recent survey of individuals in Michigan and Pennsylvania, both states that have legalized iGaming and retail casinos, found positive interactions between the two. And for the sake of time, I've highlighted only three on this slide. Number one, 80% of adults who play online are also regular customers at brick-and-mortar casinos. And as far as frequency goes, 88% of adults say they visit a casino once a month or less. Meanwhile, iGaming sessions occur more frequently, but customers reported spending similar amounts on both activities. The takeaway from this is that both can coexist because they are seen by consumers as different and complementary forms of gaming. I think another really important takeaway for casinos is that iGaming customers are generally younger, more educated, and affluent than the average brick-and-mortar casino goer. MGM, a member of the SBA, is among the casinos that tout the benefits of iGaming, sustaining their retail customer base as individuals increasingly look to technology for entertainment. So with that, let's talk about Virginia. Based on the framework that Delegate Simon described earlier, Virginia is positioned to generate an estimated $5.3 billion in new taxable revenue over the course of 5 years. This figure does not include the millions of licensing fees that would come from operator licensing. These fees certainly could be applied to state programs or, as been discussed, help support the creation of the Gaming Commission and/or assist in funding enforcement action against illegal operators. Beyond the revenue, though, what is significant, legalizing iGaming protects consumers. And in my opinion, that should be the fundamental motivator for Virginia policymakers. There's been a lot of discussion on responsible gaming, but I just want to touch it because it's so important and fundamental to our success as partners of the state and to protect consumers. Legal online license operators, like members of the SBA, they use the same technology as banks to ensure that only authorized individuals can authorize their platforms. Across the 5 SBA companies, they employ over 200 responsible gaming employees whose exclusive role is to promote safe gambling. They are fully dedicated to actively monitoring consumer behavior, intervening when needed, and ensuring that customers always play responsibly. The leads of these teams have presented to many of you and your caucuses over the years, and we're always happy to arrange additional conversations about the legal industry and its dedication to RG. I know there's been a lot of questions today that I think have really illustrated how much commitment there is from the industry, but nonetheless, we're always happy to bring in more experts to talk through this with you. Just quickly on responsible gaming tools, we have integrated responsible gaming tools across each platform to ensure customers are safe online. That includes all of these various tools. One thing that I wanted to highlight in light of Delegate Krizik's, your comment earlier about the perceived risk of suicide tied to gambling. Love to connect more with you offline on where your understanding of that dynamic. But we've heard that criticism a lot from adversaries around the country, and looking into the studies that they have cited that have tried to make this correlation. Many of these studies were done globally and oftentimes were not tied to legal sports betting, especially no legal sports betting in the country, because all these studies were done before 2018, before states had the right to legalize mobile sports betting. Oftentimes, what was tied to increased suicide rates was illegal operators extending credit to bettors. That is a practice that no licensed SBA sports betting operator or anyone licensed in Virginia or around the country would or is allowed to do. So I think that's important to clarify that while we of course acknowledge that there is risks to gambling, there always has and there always will be, but I think really contextualizing what the risks are and what the industry is doing to prevent individuals from playing beyond their means is just absolutely critical. I mean, when you talk about the bill and how the $400 million or $5.3 billion over 5 years will be appropriated, the only appropriation we weigh in on is making sure 2.5% of the annual tax rate goes to fund responsible gaming. And that's on top of the millions of dollars that these companies invest separate of tax dollars, the partnerships that they have with groups and state. No one succeeds if there isn't proper care to that. So I'm happy to pause for questions there, but I just really wanted to drill that point home from our perspective.
I think you can go ahead and continue.
Okay, just a couple more slides. So, based on available data on consumers interacting with these RG tools, 93% of platform users have reported that RG tools have helped them manage their play. And according to registered voters in Virginia, 83% of voters attribute one or more positive sentiments with the regulated online gaming industry. And then finally, I think Delegate Bulova, you asked this question earlier about what is the nature of players who have participated in unlicensed gaming? What happens when a legal market comes into play? We, both the SBA and other economists have studied this dynamic a lot over the past couple of years, and there are studies that have now come out that actually report really positive shifts from players on the unlicensed or illegal market to the legal market. Based on responses from legal iGaming states, more than 60% of legal iGaming customers previously made bets in the illegal market or have played legally in other states. From that subset, once a legal market was made available, 90% of those players transitioned to the regulated market. In other words, establishing a legal market with safeguard works. And in turn, people are protected and the state generates critical revenues. So with that concludes my remarks. And Delegate Simon highlighted that several other states in this region have either benefited from successful legal iGaming markets or are contemplating legalizing. So Virginia is in good company as you seek to take some next steps. But thank you for your time. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. I have one question, then I'm going to go to my colleagues. So what do you say to all the other gaming institutions that are in here worried to death about iGaming going to suck the blood out of all their organizations, from my veterans and Animal Kingdom and the charitable world to HHR to everybody else is afraid and scared to death that iGaming is going to come. You know, if I'm a casino, I'd rather them get a steak in my steakhouse and come play there versus sitting in my pajamas and sleeping at night and having the thing gamble for me in hopes that I win and not go broke. So please tell everybody in here that's looking at the back of your head right now why they should go along with iGaming.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Chairman. I think that I'm one of many people that are going to come up here today and in the subsequent months and talk about our perspective on what is right for Virginia and how different verticals of gaming interact with each other. And, you know, I highlighted this a little bit in the presentation today, but I think there's a lot of discretionary income to go around for various gaming verticals. We saw in Pennsylvania in 2024 record high revenues, and that doesn't even account for the thousands of distributed gaming machines that are widespread in Pennsylvania are currently untaxed or regulated. So I think that there's a lot of proof in concept in individuals having different interests in gaming. I also, again, MGM is a member of the SBA, and we, in coordination with them, have understood that they see iGaming as a net benefit to their retail casino. Again, you know, highlighted this briefly, but there is the newer wave of adults seek their entertainment online, and if you meet them where they are and tether it to a casino, there's a lot of ways to build your network of future casino goers through making the connection online. And really, I'll follow up with more of the data from the global, the GSG study that really illustrates that consumers see these as different forms of entertainment. They might want to maybe play really low stakes poker for $1 a hand on a Thursday night so that they have a sense of how the game goes when they go to the casino and they buy dinner and they play a round of poker and then they go to a show later. I think there's an ecosystem that at the end of the day will benefit the state. And I think beyond all that, the fact that the illegal market in Virginia is estimated between $12 billion and $16 billion spent by individuals currently tells me that people are really at risk to problem gambling. That will negatively impact all the regulated markets that you currently have. So I think because people have shown a desire to be on these illegal platforms, I think there is good public policy to say, hey, let's legalize them, let's tie them to casinos so they are within the ecosystem of iGaming and ultimately generate more tax revenue for the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Senator Evan?
Yeah. Thank you. I've got two questions, Mr. Chairman. The first is, what impact does the online gaming have on the Virginia Lottery, which benefits K-12 education and has an online component?
Sure. So there's a few markets in the U.S. that have both iLottery and iGaming. I haven't seen any specific studies that can isolate the dynamic of those two gaming verticals. What I can say is that in looking at the numbers in Pennsylvania and Michigan, both iLottery and iGaming took major hits during COVID and have since rebounded to at consistent rates for their respective verticals. I also, thinking through, again, the fact that Virginia has one of the most successful iLottery products in the country, this is amidst a growing illegal market for iGaming. So, Virginia's market, at least in the last reporting quarter, continued to grow to record levels. The past couple years, the illegal market has grown to billions of dollars. So I do think that they attract different consumers, despite the fact that there are some similarities. They're also very different. So I think we will work with the lottery to the extent that they have concerns, but I think that they can coexist.
Okay, and as another question, I'm really serious with this question. I know it won't sound serious, but can we go after American citizens who are facilitating the illegal gaming, like Ryan Seacrest? Can Virginia take some sort of action, or other states? Because if he's endorsing it, he should know that he's engaging in an illegal activity, and maybe if we go after him, that'll discourage others.
Yes, I think that there are ways to not only, I think, regardless of him being the part of the face of these unlicensed sweepstakes, I think that there are ways to even cut through the unlicensed market through payment processors and other ways that ensure that the vendors that are supporting these operations will be hamstrung once a legal market is.
And Mr. Chairman, just I'm not going to ask you to answer it now, but if there are other ways that we can change our laws to target the people who facilitate the illegal operation for Virginia to discourage them, please follow up with us.
We absolutely will. Thank you.
Delegate Creasy.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on Senator Eben's questions. The one of the things maybe we can do is crack down on the advertising, and there may be ways that we can do that. So, but what I'm worried about the iLottery, we have, as you mentioned, the most successful iLottery in the country, and I think we're the only state where lottery is bringing more money in online from the online betting than they are bricks and mortar, and yet the bricks and mortar is still doing quite well. So kudos to our lottery folks, but it kind of undercuts your argument, though, that having expanding iGaming will somehow put a serious dent into the illegal offshore iGaming. If iLottery is already out there with a iGaming type of product, and yet, as you mentioned, the illegal market is continuing to grow in Virginia, how do you reconcile that?
And maybe to correct my comments, while iLottery and iGaming can have similar products, they also offer a variety of different products that ultimately attract a different consumer and demographic. Based on the fact that there's such a prominent unregulated iGaming market currently in the Commonwealth, these are customers that may or may not be captured by iLottery. We've seen in other states that I talked about on my last slide that once a legal iGaming market launches, which it did in Michigan and Pennsylvania, where some of these voters were surveyed, they shift to the legal iGaming market, 90% of those who are already gaming on unregulated sites. So again, I think there's just a lot of different segments of the consumer base that will be drawn to certain products, and ultimately legalizing iGaming will protect consumers, really thousands of consumers that are on the illegal market currently that are not being captured necessarily by iLottery.
Mr. Chair, follow up. Yeah. So that's basically the argument that was made when we expanded or created the legal market for online sports betting. How, and you're involved in that, right? So can you tell us how that has done? How is sports betting doing vis-a-vis the illegal market?
Yes, there was a quick image in the video that was shown at the beginning that showed the decline in users on illegal platforms like Bovada and some others that in legal sports betting states. So there has been a noticeable decline in those that have legalized sports betting. Same goes for Virginia. I think the problem is that just like mobile sportsbook operators or mobile online game operators in the SBA, they offer both sports betting and iGaming when it's available. So if you haven't legalized one component of the platform, it's still going to give life to the illegal operators in Virginia. So I think you'll see a much more noticeable drop-off once you have legalized both sports betting and iGaming, because right now they can sustain their illegal operations in the absence of legalized iGaming.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I just want to ask the audience if you know what iGaming is. Raise your hand. Okay, everybody knows. So I think for the public, though, and maybe for some of us, what are we talking about? What kind of games are we talking about that, like this casino in your pocket, if you will, that you envision would come about?
Yeah, so the 7 states that have legalized iGaming in the United States, they have authorized table games, which includes typically poker, roulette, and blackjack, and then they have slot machines. So those are the games that are traditionally found in a casino that should an individual want to play these games outside of a casino, they can do so.
Delegate Bulova.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just really quickly, because and it's kind of interrelated question, so I'll go ahead and ask them together. So I know in the bill introduced by Delegate Simon, there's some particular language here with regard to penalties for operating, conducting, or offering iGaming. I'd be interested in, with respect to how robust that is in terms of penalties. I think this is a Class 6 felony, and then some particular fines, how that compares to like a New Jersey or some of the other mature states. The other one is that missing from here is any kind of penalty for actually engaging in illegal iGaming. Am I assuming that that is captured somewhere else in the code, or is that a missing element? And the reason I ask is because, to, I think, an earlier point about getting people weaned off the illegal market, just saying this is illegal isn't going to really have enough punch unless you go ahead and say there's an actual consequence. Whether we have the ability to pull the trigger or not, that's another question, but to be able to say, hey, this is illegal and subject to a $100 fine, class, X misdemeanor. So anyways, can you help me understand, I guess, the context of the operator standpoint, and then what are the penalties for engaging in illegal iGaming?
Absolutely. So to answer your second question first, the SBA would love to work with this committee and with Delegate Simon and Senator Locke on ensuring that there are provisions that would really just define what is illegal iGaming and ensure that there are penalties for those who engage without getting a license through whatever regulatory entity. And then as far as the bill makeup currently, I'd have to double check, but my understanding is those requirements were drawn from New Jersey and other states to, really make Virginia like the best in class as far as protecting consumers and ensuring that the suitability for licensed operators is top tier.
Yeah. So I appreciate your testimony. I just, call me the bad guy or whatever, history. I just need to know a couple of things, and I'm just going to be straight up blunt with you. When Paul or Delegate Kriesik and I took charitable gaming on, it really opened our eyes, and we saw a lot. All of us that sit on this dais through that process, and we found out that a lot of people that were testifying didn't want to disclose certain things about who was paying their bills and everything else, and come to find out they were testifying against or for some things, but being compensated by others. So I appreciate the gentleman that came earlier, and I think they're a wealth of knowledge. In fact, Delegate Bulova and I were just talking about Mr. Rebuck and his wealth of knowledge. My question to you, and I hope you'll be honest with me, are they being compensated by you or any other individuals to come today? I mean, I know somebody had to pay their freight to come here. They didn't come out of here because we called and figured them out in New Jersey. So I'm asking that question. Have they been compensated by the Sports Alliance or anybody that you're associated with?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else? None? Thank you so much for coming back again. And I don't know what to say about how much we're spending on illegal games, but there's a consistent theme that's been going all day, and that we got to do something on illegal games. And the Attorney General spending that much of his time and his money chasing those and not getting any money back in return is something that I think all of us are definitely going to start trying to hone in on. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yep. Next, we have the public health concerns of iGaming, understanding the social and economic impacts from Brienne. Okay, I'm going to mess this up. Dura Shallow. Say that again?
Sure, sir, no problem. Everyone messes it up.
Right, got it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here this morning. My comments are going to be vastly different than what we've heard this morning. It's a real privilege to be here. Interesting fact, do you know that if you live within 50 miles of a casino, the rate or the risk profile for problem gambling doubles? What if I told you that if you live within 10 miles of a casino, it goes up to 90% risk? So what happens when we consider putting a casino in every single pocket. By way of introduction, my name is Briandora Shawal. I am a proud resident of Fairfax. I run a firm that specializes in problem and responsible gaming policy. I've done work across the globe on this issue. By way of disclosure to the good senator, I am retained by the Campaign for Fairer Gambling. I am proudly representing them across the nation, driving awareness and attention to the dangers of online gaming.
Thank you.
Today, I am here on my own accord and behalf, and I would like to begin by saying I am in strong opposition to iGaming. I have worked for 13 years in this space, and there is no doubt that we deserve to give this the time, debate, and attention that it deserves. These products are different. These products are dangerous. Mr. White, a friend of mine and a mentor and my former boss, said something that I couldn't agree more with. We should treat gambling the way we treat drugs and alcohol. Today, you've heard exhaustive talking points about the big, bad, illegal market. Well, let me tell you about another big, bad, illegal market. Why don't we talk about illicit drugs? $2.7 trillion Americans are spending annually on illicit drug use. And forgive me, but to the best of my working knowledge, I'm not appearing in any state house talking about how the state can get a portion of that revenue and how big business can get in on it too and compete with illicit drugs. 2.7 trillion. We are talking about something that is glamorized and on your phone, something you can do in the bathroom. I wish I were making these things up, but this is what we are talking about today. Earlier, you heard that this is a public health issue, and no doubt, and it's coming at a massive cost. Delegate Krzyk, you brought up that the federal government is doing nothing around this public health issue, and it is costing Americans $14 billion in social costs. There is an estimate of 9 million American adults that currently are suffering with gambling-related harm or addiction. And that number is likely vastly underreported because of the shame and stigma and the lack of resources that are going into addressing this public health issue. So let's talk about gambling-related harm. 5.5% of women and 11.9% of men globally are experiencing some level of harm. And with all due respect to the previous presenter, we disagree as experts in this field that it has nothing to do with the credit that is given to an individual that attributes to the high rates of suicide. It has everything to do with the shame and the stigma and the mass destruction that it creates in one's life. In fact, an individual with a gambling disorder is 15 times more likely to die by suicide than the general population. One of those studies found that 4.2% of suicides were found to be gambling related specifically. And by the way, it's not just an individual problem. For every person who gambles at high risk levels, it's negatively impacting 6 other individuals. This isn't a personal problem. This is a family problem. This is a community problem. This is going to be a Virginia problem. And that's Virginia right there in the middle of the screen with the arrow, as Mr. White pointed out, not doing a whole lot as it currently stands, which means if you increase the amount of gambling, you increase the amount of problems, and you're working from a deficit as it is to handle the gambling-related harm currently happening within the Commonwealth. In fact, actually, a little bit of math highlights that you're already incurring $331 million in social costs due to gambling-related harm. That's today. That's what my taxes are going towards, your taxes are going to, because we are not adequately funding these programs. So not that long ago, we were all here talking about sports betting, right? And arguably, consumers wanted it. Consumers were saying, we want this, we want you to legalize it. But what happens now? How do Americans feel about the fact that sports betting is now legal? 8% say this is a good thing. Now, forgive me, I haven't heard from any consumers today. I've heard from industry, I've heard from experts in the field, but I've not heard from anyone saying, please put a casino in my pocket. This is what my life is missing right now. So there's an interesting piece of research that I think gets overlooked a lot that we should talk about. It's called the total consumption model. And what this looked at is society as a whole. And what happens when you increase the amount or the opportunities to gamble? What happens? Simply put, you're going to increase the number of problems. This isn't about, do we capture the illegal? You're increasing gambling no matter how you slice it and dice it. And that's going to simultaneously bring more problems to the population. I had mentioned in my opening remarks that I think game design or the differentiation in products is an important component of this debate. And I stand by that. Because this isn't just about accessibility, that at 2 in the morning I can be playing in a casino on my phone in bed while my husband sleeps next to me, my kids down the hallway. I can also place really large wagers. So I got kind of interested. I go in every state, right? And I want to download the apps. I want to feel the products. I want to know what's out there. And you guys, I copied and pasted this description from online, from New Jersey. 5 real, 15 payline slot. This game truly stands out in the world of online slot thanks to its $75,000 max bet. 1 second. And by the way, I can play on a credit card in some jurisdictions. $75,000. That dopamine rush for a $75,000 spin is not any different than a $1 one. You know, once upon a time when I started in this space, I was told gambling was entertainment. It was a good time to spend my discretionary income, have fun with my friends, maybe go out to dinner, have a drink. But what happens when gaming is in isolation? Where is the entertainment in that? What is entertaining about $75,000 in 1 second of my life? This is about continuous gambling instantaneously with rapid feedback. In fact, actually, they've been able to prove that the game design and the speed at which the games happen, like a table game, is even greater than that if you were to go into a casino. We're talking about high accessibility. I mean, the youth, aren't they astounding? I have a 4-year-old who can work my iPhone better than I can. Right? What kind of tech-savvy youth can find ways to get on these products? And let's not talk about the dangers of cross-promotion. You just heard from the Sports Betting Alliance. Sports betting, who wants iGaming, who also operates fantasy, all of which they can cross-promote to get the players to move from one vertical and product to the next. And we're going to talk about Dr. Leah Nauer's work out of Rutgers University that highlights very clearly that the more types of products you play, the more dangerous it is, the greater the risk you have for developing a problem. So we've heard a lot about that big, bad, illegal market. They seem horrible. I don't like them either. No consumer protections. But what about all of the legal market actors where there's problems? How about this first headline? A psychiatrist tried to quit gambling. Betting apps kept her hooked. In fact, actually, it was iGaming, and it was found that this one operator was sending more than 100 messages a day to the player to play some more. Study says New Jersey is one of the most gambling-addicted states. Yeah, 6% of their population has a gambling problem. Kids as young as 11 are becoming addicted to online gambling. I think you get my point. So let's talk a little bit about New Jersey. Mr. Rebuck, I've also known my whole career, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. And while I was happy to hear him speak to the market, I think there's another flip side to New Jersey we have to talk about. While it might be flourishing from a market perspective, it's coming at the cost of the people of New Jersey. In fact, their rate of gambling problems is 3 times the national average. The overall rate there of problem gambling is about 6%, and it's 13% if you want to talk about the moderate risk gamblers. And as you can see, I've highlighted below the percentage of those individuals that have reported having thoughts of suicide and the 6% that had nearly attempted suicide. Again, not to be critical of the presenter before me, but that study happened in 2023 after legalized iGaming and sports betting within the state of New Jersey, not internationally. In fact, actually, New Jersey has such a problem that they called for a task force to be convened to talk about how they're going to address this issue because it's coming at a significant cost. And here you can see that not only has the governor gotten involved, but as well as legislators who have called this, and I quote, an urgent public health crisis. And they're not alone. Connecticut and Pennsylvania also referenced today. One of the most alarming things that we've learned since Connecticut actually legalized iGaming is that 71% of their revenue is coming from 7% of the residents. In fact, 1.8% of them have a gambling problem and 4.9% of them are at risk. So this begs the question, who's building these big operations? 71%, for what it's worth, is 11% higher than what the World Health Organization anticipated, which was 60% of global revenues was coming from a certain small percentage of the population. So Connecticut's higher than that. Oh, and they're not alone too. Pennsylvania is also really struggling about what to do with all their problem gambling issues since they legalized sports betting and iGaming. In fact, actually, they passed a bipartisan resolution, and the explicit intent is to go study and figure out what practices need to be put in place to provide guardrails for the industry and relief for all the individuals who have now been harmed. There's more, you guys. There's more people saying you got to know what you're getting into. The Journal of American Medicine. All these years, we've wanted the federal government and groups to step up and be vocal about the dangers that come with gambling, and they're starting to. Another stat, 60 to 80% of high school students report gambling in the past year. More than 10% of young sports bettors have considered suicide. This is a real public health issue. Here's one of my favorite. A gentleman, a very tremendous expert of global health at Harvard, he says that these online gambling products can be 10 times more harmful than other forms of gambling. And a good friend of mine, Dr. Timothy Fong out of UCLA, you know what he calls it? The fast food of gambling. Highly processed, highly synthesized, and designed to hit the dopamine exactly like they want. And I mentioned Dr. Nauer out of Rutgers University. She says something that I think really brings it home when we're talking about a casino in your home. The ones with the highest rates are lying in bed at night on their iPad while their partner's asleep. The Lancet Public Health Journal, an independent medical journal, says gambling, a neglected public health issue. We have so quickly normalized gambling, and we've done very little to truly understand and account for the harms that are directly derived from this. World Health Organization also thinks it's time we start doing something. As you can see, 60% of losses coming from harmful levels of gambling. Gambling will drive poverty by diverting household spending from other essentials. We've heard a lot about discretionary income today and how that's how we should be spending, our dollars in gambling. But what about all the other things I want to spend my discretionary income on? What about going out to dinner? What about going to the movies? And maybe we're the last family on earth that bowls, but we kind of like that. There's something called the lower risk gambling guidelines that suggest that about only 1% of income or 3% of discretionary income should be used for gambling. Do we really need to offer everyone all these exhaustive options for gambling? What about the other good things in life? I'm not going to belabor this. You've heard enough about the illegal market. The truth is that the illegal market is here. And even in states that have legalized, there is still a presence for the illegal market. My question for you all is, do you make this decision to legalize based upon the people who are breaking the law right now, or because you believe this is really what's best for the Commonwealth and what the people want? There was an economic assessment done by the Campaign for Fairer Gambling. They commissioned NEAR. And this is one of the first of its kind that really examine what are those costs that are incurred by the state due to iGaming. iGaming alone is projected to incur about $350 million to New Jersey annually in healthcare costs, welfare, homelessness, and criminal justice issues. And that's difficult because you have to account that those fiscal costs offset the increased tax revenue collected from iGambling. All right, last financial implications. There was a very interesting study that came out of USC and UCLA, and it was a causal study, which I think was a really important distinction here, not a correlation. And it shows us that the average credit score after legalizing iGaming drops. And so do the credit card delinquency rates and auto loan delinquency rates and bankruptcy. So as a Virginian, I was kind of curious. What happens if we do this? What happens to our economics if this is true? Well, did you know that Virginians, we hold the 9th largest amount of credit card debt in the nation? And some studies actually suggest that we're the 3rd highest state with the most debt to income ratio. Oh, and week over week, our unemployment numbers weren't looking that great. Look that up too. They are also going up. In fact, we're actually 16th highest in the nation for unemployment. And our auto loan delinquencies, they're at 18.12%. I don't know if we can afford the financial consequences to our people if we expand gambling. As I said, it's been an absolute privilege. I do apologize that my remarks were very different than what you've heard, but I'm proud because I believe that this opportunity is important for the people of Virginia who should know what kind of bet they're getting if this is what you guys take.
Brianne, thank you so much for that. I think many of us up here agree with you, and that's what we struggle with as policymakers. Delegate Bolova has a question for you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I couldn't agree with you more that there are serious consequences with respect to gaming in general, and certainly gambling addiction is a serious problem. Otherwise, this would be a much easier process or decision to make. I guess what I wanted to see if you could kind of boil down a little bit more succinctly. Are you arguing that I guess the genie can be put back into the bottle in terms of iGaming? And if so, how do we effectuate that versus making sure that we put in proper guardrails that perhaps we haven't already considered in order to be able to mitigate the impacts? And so I wanted to get your sense about the whether it's realistic to try to get rid of this, or whether we are really truly talking about how do we ensure that we've got a stronger regulatory framework than maybe what's already been presented.
Thank you very much for your question. I think the reality is you have an illegal gambling market problem. And I think that before you go and increase the amount of gambling within the market, you need to find a way to address that. And I appreciate that it is easier for me to say that standing here and not in your seat with that responsibility. But the truth is that the research is clear that you're just going to be expanding the total market if you legalize iGaming right now. I'm not saying never. I'm saying there are too many things that aren't being addressed at this time, albeit the illegal market. Yeah, it's here, and it's a real problem for consumers, but I don't think adding more gaming solves that issue. I think that the federal government may never come to the table when it comes to addressing the public health issue of problem gambling, but the state could do more. You were halfway in my graph. Wouldn't it be great if you were at the top before you further expanded the gambling market? I'm saying there's too many things that need to be resolved before, if I were in your shoes, I would consider doing this.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation. Definitely eye-opening, and I thank you for being here today. Oh, Senator McPlake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just reiterate the comments from Delegate Bolova. Appreciate your testimony. There are a lot of other things that the General Assembly is considering. Have you also looked at skill gaming, other forms? And then I'll have just one brief follow-up.
Yeah, one, I was here last year talking about your consolidated gaming commission. I think that's a wonderful idea. Yes, I do share concerns about skill gaming. I think that those machines are predatory, they're unregulated. I think there are some real concerns. But today, my remarks are focused on what I believe to be the most concerning, which is putting gaming on your device 24/7.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
So one of the underlying principle, which is sort of behavioral health, right, issue overall, one can also download an app today and it has the same repetitive dopamine hit behaviors that is non-gambling, whether it's a kid's game or something else, right? Because it requires you to buy that 99-cent little level up to do better than the next competitor, right? Most of the entire market is built around these little incentives, which are the same thing as gambling dopamine hits. How do you deal with that as an overall context? Because it is creating the same pattern in the brain.
Actually, it's
At kids level games that are innocent and little cute blocks and little pigs that hop across the screen, right? Like all of those are creating the exact same behavior that we have all across the board. I mean, that's what we're also dealing with overall, not just gaming. I don't think the legislature is going to ban like little cute kitty cats, that level up for 99 cents, but ultimately that's a behavioral health issue. How do you deal with that larger societal issue?
Oh, Senator, I wish I had that crystal ball to make it all better and easier. The truth is we are starting to learn about the dangers of those cute little video games, especially how often they are consumed by children, right? Research is very clear. The younger you're exposed to or engaged in gaming or gambling-like mechanics, the greater you're disposed to developing a gambling problem later in life. This is why the minimum age for participation is really key here. Delaying the entry into the market until the brain is fully developed, which by the way is 25. So I guess we'll take 21 if we can do it. But this is a growing concern within the mental health and behavioral health sector, and we are starting to do more education around gaming and just general dopamine hitting products like the ones we're talking to.
Thank you, Senator McPike. Delegate Kresick.
Now, I want to thank you again for addressing us and reminding us of the serious consequences and keeping us grounded. But I just wanted to, and while you're up here, if you want to mention, if you want to reflect on this, but this is, earlier we heard that in Jersey, that one reason to expand into iGaming, online iGaming, is because it helps the casinos. And I know there's a lot of folks in the General Assembly and around the Commonwealth that want to expand casinos in Virginia beyond the 5 we already licensed. So I just want to caution everybody, if iGaming needs to come to the rescue of casinos, then we're in trouble, and we've got to be careful about oversaturation.
I would just add to that, I think that we're talking about a lot of gaming in the state.
No other questions? I would just say, apparently my son's going to be an addict because he's played Fortnite and Minecraft, and all his buddies and everybody in the world's played that stuff. So I think it's a bigger issue that we might have to look at from the 30,000-foot view and see maybe if, I don't know. It's a great question posed by my colleague to my left. Well, thank you so much. We're going to move on to our last presentation, Dr. Brian Wyman. He is President and CEO of the Innovation Group. Welcome, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Brian Wyman. I'm the president and CEO of the Innovation Group, which is a nonpartisan research firm and advisory firm in gaming and hospitality. I emphasize nonpartisan. Our client list includes Caesars, Boyd Gaming, Rush Street, Cordish, Hard Rock, Churchill. You'll recognize some of those names as the operators in the state. Our client list also includes many online and land-based sports betting companies. Some of those have been represented here today in some form or fashion. Additionally, the American Gaming Association study that you've heard so much about today, our firm authored that in collaboration with the American Gaming Association. And in 2018, we had the immense privilege to work with JLARC on the study Gaming in the Commonwealth, which ultimately resulted in the advancement of gaming in the state of Virginia. I didn't realize that Brianne was going to have a quote from me in one of her prior slides. So that was nice to see. I'm also, on a personal note, a proud graduate of the University of Richmond, and so this is hitting a little bit close to home for me. I have immense respect for the challenges you all are faced with as policymakers. It's been exhausting just taking notes through the presentations today and seeing the range of numbers that are being thrown at you. And I hope that in my brief presentation, which may deviate a little from my prior prepared comments, maybe I can tie some of those numbers together with the view of the world that we've put together as economists and researchers over the past several years and certainly the last several months. I wanted to talk just about a few things today, and understanding that we're already substantially over time, and I'll be respectful of that. I wanted to talk about iGaming's impact on land-based gaming. I wanted to talk about the broader economic impacts that are a fallout of that, and then talk about responsible gaming. But I think I'll limit my comments on responsible gaming given the in-depth comments that you've already heard about those. iGaming is really largely going to grow the total gaming market. Okay, so the amount of revenue in the state will go up when you put iGaming in. But land-based gaming will decline by about 15, 16%. And where we got that number, we were engaged in 2023 by the Maryland Lottery and Director Martin to do a nonpartisan study. They asked the exact same question when they contemplated an iGaming bill. If we implement iGaming, what will happen to our land-based casinos? And we took a look at all the states that had implemented iGaming and the states that hadn't implemented iGaming, and we looked at the land-based gaming revenues in those states, and we compared them. And it turned out that from 2019 through the pandemic into 2022, which is the last year of data that we had, the non-iGaming states' land-based casinos had gone up. And the states that had iGaming, their land-based casinos had been flat to down. And so taking that differential was how we arrived at a number of, at the time, 12 point something percent, 12.2, 12.4, somewhere in that range. Last year, or earlier this year, we were approached by a group of land-based casinos that were concerned about a similar effect in some of the states where they operated, and asked us to prepare a report that's been widely publicized throughout the industry. And we refreshed the analysis that we had done for the Maryland Lottery and arrived this year using data refreshed through 2024 at around a 15 to 16% impact on land-based casinos. So I think it's one thing to come up and say, hey, the revenues in such and such state that's implemented iGaming are flat. iGaming didn't hurt them. But who celebrates flat when the rest of the industry is growing at 12, 15%, whatever that number looks like? I certainly don't celebrate flat in my annual pay raises. Once we've established that there's an impact of iGaming on land-based gaming revenues, everything else economically just follows. So if your company loses revenue, necessarily you have to cut costs. And the cost that comes first is labor. Okay? Some jobs are fixed. I can't reduce down to 3/4 of a general manager at the casino, but I can certainly cut servers, dealers, slot attendants, and those types of positions that are more variable with visitation and labor. I'll also note that casinos are going to be hyper-focused on preserving their best players, the ones that generate the most amount of income with the least amount of labor for the casino. These are going to be your bigger players, your higher rollers. So in order to get that 15% decline in revenues, you're actually going to have to cut visitation by more than 15% because you're cutting lower, sort of lower worth players to the casino. Okay, so what we're going to see as a result of that is less spending in the hotel, in the restaurants, in all of the ancillary things that make an integrated resort an integrated resort. When we reduce the casino revenue, additionally, you get a tax offset. So I I view the world as a math problem. My doctorate's in mathematics. Okay, so what happens? We have all this new iGaming revenue. Great. There's a tax revenue associated with that. Great. My interest is sharing with you guys what's on both sides of the balance sheet here. I'm not pro or anti iGaming. I want to be really clear about that. I live in Las Vegas. I spend a decent amount of time in casinos. I work with and in casinos all the time. It's a pastime. I grew up playing poker. I'm a New Jersey native originally, cut my teeth in Atlantic City. I'm a pro consumer choice type of industry advocate. But in any case, on the other side of that balance sheet or that ledger is, okay, we're cutting casino revenues, so there's an offset in gaming tax that we have to consider before we just land on the headline number presented on the iGaming side. And then additionally, I mean, it's just an easy economic flow. If you have fewer jobs, then you have less labor income going into people's pockets. If you have less labor income going into people's pockets, there's less money being spent at the supermarket, there's less money being spent at Best Buy, and so you get fractional job loss in those associated industries. And so I'm basically here to say, I don't envy the position that you're in because you're going to be presented with some tax gain from the idea of legalizing iGaming, and you have to balance that against what does that do to the broader Virginia economy. Not to mention the responsible gaming issues that we've spent so much time on in this session. As I was listening to the other presenters today, I heard so many things that now you might be sitting there going, well, how do we square what this person said with what this new guy is saying? And so let me try to do a little of that. New Jersey job data, we have these in our pockets now, as we've been reminded so many times. So I said, okay, well, what's going on with casino jobs and the DGE reports in New Jersey? In 2017, New Jersey had, if my math is correct, 22,178 land-based casino jobs, and today they have 23,000. Great story, right? iGaming didn't harm anything, right? 2018, though, they had 27,927 jobs because they opened 2 casinos in 2018. And 5,800 jobs or thereabouts got added to the job count. Now today's 23,000 don't sound so good by comparison. And iGaming, even though New Jersey had iGaming since 2013, if you look at New Jersey's iGaming tally, it was low, 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 and then adoption and COVID happened, and iGaming went through the roof. And it's never come back down. It's sustained, if not continued, to grow pretty aggressively. So I think New Jersey's job story requires just a little bit of context before we celebrate it. Additionally, jobs in Pennsylvania, I have a note here that same-store casino jobs in Pennsylvania, and again, forgive me, but Pennsylvania in 2017, I believe it was October, passed an omnibus gaming legislation that permitted truck stop gaming, mini casinos, iGaming. Basically, if there was a form of gaming, Pennsylvania passed it in 2017. So let's just look at same-store casinos then to now, down 3,700 jobs. And you may go, wait, it's not fair to blame iGaming for those 3,700 job losses. Like there was more land-based gaming. And I would just say, okay, fine. But we know that revenue is reduced at those casinos because of more gaming, whether it was land-based or otherwise. So when revenues get reduced at Virginian casinos, which by the way haven't even finished being built yet, and there's a whole lot of economic activity that's at risk now at the not half built, sorry, but not completely phased out Virginia casinos. When revenue gets reduced at those casinos or stunted versus growth projections, that money won't get spent, right? Jobs will get lost in those casinos, or would-be jobs won't ever come to fruition. So I think that kind of squares some of that. And I when I was listening to the lady, and I enjoyed her presentation from the SBA earlier, and she said 80% of iGamers also go to casinos. And I think that really lends some credence to the idea that the overlap between these two customer bases is immense, right? Like if you like to gamble in person, you're going to like to gamble on your phone and vice versa. And so we're not just creating a whole bunch of new revenue out of iGaming. It has to come from somewhere because it's the same people doing it, right? So some of that comes out of the casinos, which our study shows on an objective basis. By the way, Wall Street analysts also agree on that point. But it comes out of other forms of spending as well. Again, I won't hammer on responsible gaming because I think some other people have already done that. But I thought that if you're going to spend time focused on responsible gaming, I think there's a lot of noise in the literature out there, and it's well-meaning researchers all being funded by various sources on both sides of the aisle. But at least the Lancet article or articles that Brianne referenced earlier, basically the thing that stands out to me is that online gamblers show a problem gaming propensity at 1.5 times the rate of regular casino gamblers. And so that gives me a little bit of pause. And I find now that we have iGaming in a lot of states, people going, well, okay, let's measure how much impact iGaming has had on problem gaming propensities in our states. But they didn't measure a baseline rate before they advanced iGaming legislation. And so now they're sort of asking like, well, what do we think it was prior? And so I would say at the end, this is an incredibly nuanced and complex policy decision. And as I said, it's unenviable the position that you're in, having to balance these things together. And so I commend you for taking this on. But I do think that it's worth studying problem gaming activity in the Commonwealth pretty well today, prior to making these kind of decisions, so that if that's the direction that you end up deciding to go, you have a before and after, so you can make good decisions on the back end of this. And I think overall, taking a look at what will this actually do economically, and I apologize, as I said, I've studied this in many other states and published those findings. You can find them, they're available online. But I haven't studied them specifically in Virginia, and I was a last-minute addition to the speaker list today, or I would have come with Virginia-specific numbers. But I think that's worth doing as well, really to figure out what those economic impacts are broadly in the state. You're balancing tax benefit against job loss and economic loss and responsible gaming potential harm. And so again, I'll pause for questions here, but I hope that some of what I said was able to reconcile this, what you heard today.
Thank you, Dr. Wyman. 2 questions for you. One, and you can tell us no, but the study that you all did with your lottery, could you get that to us so we can look at it so we don't have to pay for our own study to see that and share that with lottery over there, because we're tight on money.
I'd certainly prefer you pay me to do it.
Yeah.
No, I'm happy to share the Maryland study with you. It should be publicly available from Maryland as well.
Okay, great. And then the other question, would it be possible for you to crunch those numbers so we could at least, as a committee, try to make a decision based on some real data numbers? We would love to have that opportunity to hear your thoughts on what those numbers are going to crunch out like.
I'm sure we can accommodate that.
That'd be great. Thank you. Any other?
Yeah.
Senator Eben.
Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Wyman. Just for clarity, who are you representing today? Did someone are you a client of someone or representing an interest?
I have a client. I think it would be overstating it to say I'm representing an interest, but I do have a client that paid for the travel for me to be here today, and that's the group of casinos that's opposing the iGaming legislation.
Existing brick and mortar casinos.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mortar casinos and others, but yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yellis, appreciate it.
This is maybe a little bit in the weeds, but and we can talk offline. But I was just trying to kind of think through. I mean, a lot of your presentations kind of about robbing Peter to pay Paul, and I hate that expression since my name is Paul, but but I still use it.
Paul to pay Peter.
That's better. I like being the victim better. Now what are there bills out there, laws out there where like, let's say we were to go with iGaming and we had some kind of a tax, a variable tax, or some kind of a keeping. For example, I'm mostly concerned about iLottery because I think from what we've heard today, maybe that would be the most impacted. And we know where the iLottery money goes through the K through 12. And I think Senator Eben mentioned this earlier. And is there such a thing as having a like a variable tax that would be like a rolling average of the losses, perhaps accrued by lottery over the last 3 years, and you would use something that would keep them whole so that we wouldn't be losing money for K through 12?
I think if your question is whether such things exist out there, I don't know of them, but I don't think that make-whole provisions on the whole are unheard of.
That Mr. Chairman, follow up. So you don't think that they really work? Is that what you're saying?
No. I think that make-whole provisions in various areas of legislation are proposed somewhat commonly, and so I don't know of any that exist today that would make a lottery whole, for example, or make casinos whole. Although I think Maryland's proposed iGaming bill did have a provision to support potential job loss in their, that they were contemplating.
Follow up, Mr.
Yes, sir.
So 2 last questions, and thank you everybody for going through this long marathon of presentations. But as you can tell, this is a very important issue, and there's a lot to it. And it's been nice that you've been the final presentation because you've been able to hit upon much of what we've heard and elaborate on it. But one of the concerns around jobs is the new technologies that are out there. Even casinos now are going to, where they have the table games are being kind of replaced by electronic table games in the casinos. So less dealers and things like that. But there was a discussion in New Jersey how they've gained 1,800 jobs, but the answer was that they were the first into it. And we've also had, I think the chairman mentioned in the bill that was presented this past session, there was a line in there that made it clear that we couldn't restrict it to just Virginia jobs. Is that something that we could do? I mean, certainly we could take that line out, but it doesn't mean it would definitely be then Virginia jobs. But there are my understanding is there's a lot of jobs, and we heard the kind of iGaming that's out there is similar to the poker games and blackjack, obviously, and roulette and things like that you have at the casino. So if you have a poker game or a blackjack game, you have 5 or 6 people around the table plus a dealer. Those would all be, my understanding is they would be jobs that would be in like studios somewhere in the ether, if you will, but we could have them in Virginia. Could you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's certainly possible to legislate that live dealer studios, if they're going to operate on your iGaming platforms, be located in the state. I suspect that would result in still minimal development of jobs, and it's more likely to result in online providers not offering live dealer games in state. Through conversations with various providers, they're certainly looking to centralize their operations and offer these types of things efficiently to multiple markets rather than split off and build studios in various states. And I know that in my conversations with operators, and we did this research as we were putting together our economic analysis earlier this year, I had conversations with prominent online operators about the number of jobs that they have, for example, in Michigan. And it was usually low single digits. And it was typically local VIP host type folks who, in Michigan, you could imagine someone having to be there to take your best players to the Red Wings game or the Lions game. And that was sort of the nature of the jobs that have been created.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. doesn't want to. Quick question. I appreciate you thinking in terms of the economic aspects of this, and also really appreciate the flow chart model that you went ahead and laid out. I guess one of the things that goes back to an earlier presentation, if you provide a legal avenue for iGaming, does that just shift the amount of your universe of users from illegal to legal platforms, or based on your experience, do you actually grow the number of people who are engaging in iGaming, period? And I think that's kind of a fundamental question, whether you're shifting that and getting some people in, or are you actually growing the issue?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's complicated to know the answer definitively because we can't actually see the records of the offshore or illegal operators. I will say that in our work for the American Gaming Association, which we just published, one of the key findings was that even with gaming expansion happening, we're seeing the share of the illegal market, and again, this is as self-reported by players, so primarily this was based on a survey. But what we're seeing is that the share of the illegal market remains pretty strong, if not completely consistent with what it was, a few years ago. This varies by online sports versus online gaming versus skill-based machines, land-based gaming machines that are unregulated. But by and large, we're seeing, even with expanded regulated gaming, we're seeing unregulated gaming staying strong.
I guess what you're saying is you don't have enough data to tell you that if we were to legalize iGaming, that you go from a universe of 100,000 people who are engaging in iGaming, now illegal, to 200,000 people, regardless of the mix of whether it's legal or illegal platforms.
I think it's clear that we'll grow the number of people that are engaging in online gaming as a whole. I think the question is how much of the online gaming that's happening illegally or in the offshore markets is repatriated.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's going to conclude our day. I just want to end with a couple of comments real quick, if I may. I think one of the things that run throughout the testimony today and the speakers was that we need to get the VGC set up like yesterday and start enforcing the law so we can get a handle on some of these things. So I will just speak for myself personally. I'm not passing any other bills to you all help us get the VGC done, because we're just creating a more mess, and every year that we don't get it passed creates more and more chaos. So that's the one theme I got. I'd love to delve into more, and I'm not adverse, Delegate Simon, to your bill per se, but we must get the VGC. So if there's any organizations out there that are going to fight us on the VGC, that's probably not a smart thing to do. I'm just being frank with you. You all know me well enough. But I do want to thank all the presenters that came today. There was a lot of information. I've watched my teammates up here take copious notes on things where we're short. We're not by and large gamblers. I know all of us that are on the dais and the ones that we're here currently have been learning through the process by being immersed in it and having it sitting on our doorstep. But we've learned so much from all of you all as well, and all the lobbyists that represent all the different organizations here. I just want to impress upon you, truth and honesty go a long way with us, and that we're going to be that same way with you all, but we are balancing a lot. I think we heard from a lot of the testimonies here, no one wished they were sitting up on this dais trying to make these decisions. And I can tell you, it sucks. It sucks. And it's not easy. So I just want to say thank you for being here today. We've got 2 more meetings, as Delegate Kresick, my vice chair, had mentioned. And I just want to thank my colleagues again for taking this task on, because it has not been easy. And you all are good lobbyists, so you beat us up a lot too. So, but thank you all for coming today. And with that, I will turn it over to any of my colleagues that have any other things. Okay, our attorney has to get to a 1 o'clock call. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Do we have the date on the next meeting, Ash? Not yet. That's TBD. Motion. late September. Motion to adjourn? All right, we're due.